Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. Marvel, the Alpha-level regenerative self-healing ability at the beginning. Chapter 61. Have you modified nano-suits for other people? No. He opened his mouth and took a bite of the fruit handed by the girl. Actually, when you proposed the nano-suit, the processor in my brain ran for 1.3 seconds before calling out the technology for making the nano-suit. After you left, I spent 5 hours modifying the machine. 13 hours converting those alloys into nano, 3 hours injecting the nano machine into the system, and 1 hour doing the final adjustments. Quote. Joaquin heard the corners of his mouth twitching. Can you make the culture chamber needed for cloning? Looking at the smiling Joaquin, Gululu stabbed. If we are discovered, we will be wanted by the whole universe. Then they have to find out. After getting the answer he wanted, Joaquin stopped talking and began to enjoy the services of the girls. Gululu looked at Joaquin opposite him, wondering if it was right for him to follow him. Knock knock knock, click. As the door opened, a tall young man looked at the courier at the door, as the current courier company reduced to let the old man deliver the courier. The old man in the courier suit held up the glasses frame on the bridge of his nose. May I ask if this is the home of Tony Shi, Big Shit? That's right, if you said Big Shit, then you sent it right. Sign it. The old man pointed to the big box on the ground, and handed a virtual screen to the young man, who looked confused. Wow, what is this? Are you kidding me? After the old man hand in hand taught the young man to sign, he took out a small remote control from his trouser pocket and pressed it. A very beautiful aircraft appeared above the originally empty yard. The young man opened his mouth to watch the old man being sucked into the aircraft, and said with his eyes, "Gay." Puff. The sound of a heavy body hitting the floor successfully made the young man on the second floor, who was studying weapons, put down the tools in his hands, took off his gloves and threw them on the workbench. Fake, Happy, if you can't give me a reasonable explanation, I will fire you. What's wrong with you, Happy? Seeing the fat man lying at the door, Tony hurriedly stepped forward and squatted down, patted his big fat face. Hey, Happy, hey. Tony. After Happy woke up, he quickly pressed Tony under him. There are aliens, be careful they kidnap you. What are you doing? A crisp female voice sounded at the door. Looking at the two entangled on the ground, Pepper pointed to the big box at the door. What did you buy again? Tony. Mine. Tony pushed away the Happy who was pressing him, got up and went to the door to look at the box. On the 1*1*1 three-dimensional black box, there was a small box with a folded note on it. Tony opened it and saw that the corner of his mouth was bent. Little Tony, haven't seen me for more than 3 years, do you miss me very much? Haha, I already have my own power in the universe. Now is the time to work hard. When my side stabilizes, I will go back and play with you. As a playboy in New York, how can he lack beautiful women? So I expressed to you a popular doll in the universe, maybe you will like it. Your good friend Joaquin. After the three of them worked together to carry the box back into the house, as the box was opened, a robot with its hands folded across its chest and its head buried in the bend of its legs appeared in the sight of the three of them. According to the translated instructions, Tony pressed the switch on the back of the robot's head. Dee. The robot's eyes lit up dimly, and then, like a normal person, it slowly stood up from the box. After following the instructions for a while, the robot named Kashan communicated with Tony in English, but it was all jokes and nothing useful. Looking at the robot standing in front of him, Tony didn't think about enjoying it, but whether he could transform it into a weapon or something else based on this robot. What's the matter? How long will it take for this batch of embryos to mature? Joaquin stood in front of a huge glass window, looking at the rows of circular cultivation chambers that could not be seen at a glance. Inside, unconscious bodies were sleeping with their arms around their knees. There were more than a dozen needles on their spines and the back of their heads injecting unknown liquids into their bodies. Accompanying him was Connors and his team brought by Emma and Dasha 3 years ago. With these genetic experts, the cloning technology purchased at a high price from the black market, and those more advanced instruments, Connors and their research progress was greatly accelerated. The memory areas of their brains have not been stabilized yet. There is no rush for this. According to the current speed, it will take 2 months. Once the memory areas are stabilized, virtual memories can be imbued. As for whether they can awaken successfully, it depends on the luck of these individuals. Joaquin nodded. What about the quantity? Connors clicked a few times on the console in front of him. Experimental ship number 00 has 3,500 regenerated species, experimental ship number 01 has 3,300 saber-toothed tigers, number 02 Cyclops has the same number, and no. 03 Red Devil has just formed an embryo. It still needs 4 months of catalytic screening and half a year of growth. In addition, the embryos of Quicksilver, Iceman, Free Transformation and Colossus are being promoted and are expected to be completed within a month. Quote, each small aircraft observes the development of each embryo through the monitor. Once an abnormal embryo is found, the energy supply of the embryo sac is immediately cut off. After reporting, other machines will naturally come to deal with it. Is there still no way to peel off the magnetic field gene? Connors shook his head. It still doesn't work. In Eric's cells, the genetic chain of the X gene is very unstable, and there is no guarantee that every embryo can awaken. Joaquin glanced at him, then stopped the prompting of the fast silver cells, and tried to inject the magnetic field gene. I don't need the kind of warrior who controls the magnetic field at the 2 poles. I just need a flesh-clad warrior who can get rid of the gravity of the magnetic field fast enough. Connors breathed a sigh of relief. This is easy. That's fine. The 2 left the monitoring room and returned to the rest area to sit down. They took off their shoes and stepped on the cool, fluffy lawn. A feeling of peace of mind emerged from them. Connors sat on a chair growing from rattan plants. After relaxing, he took a sip from the wine glass handed by the fragrant girl. The embryo with a specific ability has fully developed. If you need it, I can extract the X gene at any time. Joaquin shook his head. No need for now. You know Xiao's ability. That ability can only be used by the most outstanding fighters. Fighters 113 and 114 form up. Go and clear out the fighters supporting the opponent. Dasha was wearing a silk robe, sitting on a chair in the command room, looking at the chaotic battlefield on the virtual screen, making strategic adjustments from time to time. Boyika, your 3rd-tier fleet goes up, don't let the opponent have a chance to breathe. Understand. The portrait of Boyika on the virtual screen flashed away, and then some of the warships in the huge fleet of Commander Dasha were diverted to press on the opponent's relatively complete battleship group. Knock, knock, knock. Dasha tapped the armrest rhythmically with her right index finger, staring intently at the situation on the field. Everything was moving in the ideal direction, and soon the opponent's united fleet was compressed into a small range. She reached out to take the wine glass handed by the maid, took a sip, and pressed the contact button of the flagship of the Emma fleet. How long will it take for your fleet to arrive? There are still 2 jumping points, plus the rush time, up to 3 minutes. Hurry up. We lost a lot of fighter planes and warships in this battle. Understood. Emma on the other flagship hung up the communication and put down the cup in her hand. Full speed ahead, the fighter is ready to disembark. Yes, Yondu, you haven't sent your own men yet. A captain yelled at his companion in the communicator. The blue-skinned alien on the virtual screen grinned and showed a row of fangs. He, Lizaluo, I don't want to lose my life here. I give up this reward mission. Good luck. Traitor. Lizaro punched the console with a hammer. Recover the fighter plane, let's withdraw. Captain, look, the pilot of the warship on the side pointed to the screen. Our fleet's rear is blocked. Jump on the spot. Lizaro hurriedly yelled, but the next moment the huge Tier 8 warship shook, and the pilot was about to cry, Captain, the propeller of our warship has been knocked out, we can't escape. Lizaro spread out on the seat, staring blankly at the group of fighter planes still fighting in the scuffle outside the window, speechless for a long time. In 3.5 years, Joaquin rapidly expanded from a single-tier carry spaceship to the current 3 super-class tier fleets. Each fleet has 4-tier warships and 9 to 10-tier warships. There are no 2-tier and Tier 3 ships, but 6 super-large supply ships, which allow them to drift in space for a long time. A team of elven star fragrance warriors wearing vibrating gold nanosuits came to the captain's room where Lizaro was, holding a vibrating energy gun modified by the little hedgehog Gululu. Come with us, our captain wants to see you. Don't even think about it. Lizaro turned around and took out his energy pistol, and pulled the trigger on a soldier's head. View. The leading soldier just tilted his head back, then raised his foot and kicked Lizaro on the console, and the latter's strong body fell to the floor again. Boom. The soldier chopped up the energy pistol that fell on the ground with one foot, and the helmet of the battlesuit was retracted, revealing a beautiful face, and looked at the ugly Lizaro contemptuously. Take it away. Two Shongren fighters stepped forward to put magnetic handcuffs on Lizaro, and carried him to the tarmac. The last fighter pushed the pilot away, turned off the power of the spaceship, pointed his gun at the pilot, and gathered in the lobby of the spaceship. Inject nano bombs into them, and find a badly injured role model by the way. A tall warrior nodded, took out a strangely shaped injection gun from his back waist, came to a predator, pressed his head down, and the slender needle pierced directly into the gap between his spine. After the injection was completed, he raised the gun in his hand and waved it in front of the eyes of the others. The one injected into him just now is a nano bomb. Once he detects a certain fluctuation in your thinking, he will boom. Hopefully there won't be too many bodies cleaned up tomorrow. The leader of the Shongren soldiers left this nonsense and went to the tarmac to board their own landing fighters. They didn't want to stay in this stinky battleship. At this time, on the flagship of the Emma fleet, more than a dozen captains were surrounded by a tarmac. Emma searched their minds and got a general idea. She raised her hand and flashed the air in front of her nose. Search for their money and throw it out. Send someone back to the nearest trading star to collect their reward. Emma, who returned to the command room, picked up the communicator. All warships hurry up and clean up the battlefield, just rescue our own people, and set off for the AA-113 galaxy in 3 hours. After breaking the Rudbone civilization, the soldiers are allowed to move freely for 3 days. Except for the designated area, the treasures searched in other areas are your own. Yeah, ha ha ha, it's time to get rich again. Long live the captain. Long live. Emma, what's going on? Dasha, who was lying on the soft chair, sent an inquiry through the communicator. Emma was enjoying the massage of the fragrant girl. A trading fleet was robbed by us half a year ago, and an important figure in their civilization was killed by Musha. After getting the news, didn't they issue a reward to destroy us? I'm worried about where to go for activities next. Ha ha ha, the business is coming, so I'll hang up first. After hanging up the communication, Dasha casually hugged the maid on one side. Her restless little paws explored up and down, and the surrounding maids naturally took off their long nano skirts and surrounded her with a smile. Ha ha ha, General Man. Why you, in a suit and leather shoes, got off a landing ship and shook hands with the middle-aged man opposite. You guys will definitely be satisfied with this batch. Mengchen shrugged undeniably. We still believe in Fahrenheit's reputation. As he spoke, he took the virtual screen that Yu handed over, and a blue planet was spinning on the virtual screen. Joaquin smiled and introduced to the side. This planet comes from the AA-113 galaxy cluster. It is a beautiful ecological planet in the A33 galaxy. Its gravity is the same as that of the Earth, and its ecological environment is almost the same. It is very suitable for immigration. Our original land has not been cleared yet. Is this going to be an interstellar immigration? Mengchen flicked the virtual screen amusedly, and a round and long spaceship caught his eyes. Good guy, this battleship costs a lot of money, right? Yu nodded. The 4th tier Z-series battleship is also the mainstream battleship in the universe. The hangar on the belly can accommodate 76M fighters. In addition, its own firepower is not weak. One shot can open a big hole in the 3rd tier battleship. Man Chen nodded. Haha, let's go, those old people are waiting impatiently. Hehe, Shalwa, you are not kind, you are a young man, a second-hand M fighter cost us 85 universe coins. Yu dusted off the soot. 2 supernumerary 4th tier fleets are enough for you to successfully immigrate to the new planet. As long as you concentrate on development for 30 to 40 years, you will be able to expand outward. How much money will you make back then? Your exploration team that went to the universe has transmitted the approximate price back, right? More than a dozen elderly people nodded and did not speak. Yu picked up the teacup and took a sip. If it weren't for the attention you paid to my parents, the price I offered was much higher than the current price, because no one would sell it to you except me. We accept this price, but is the installment too tight? Yu shook his head. I didn't charge you any money for the first 5 years, and I even gave you a loan of 1 billion yuan as development funds. After 5 years, you will first repay the loan and the interest on the total amount, and then repay 15% every year. For a total of 10 years, as long as you are brave enough, you can support the war with war. How did our ancestors build such a large territory? Looking at the group of people who were moved, while you threw out a blockbuster, the most powerful civilization in that galaxy has been wiped out by my brother, and the planet sold to you is also his trophy. The industry on this planet is still complete, and there are more than 6 million indigenous slaves, enough for you to quickly form an army. Of course, you can also contact us to help you participate in the battle, and the commission will be divided from the captured points. If it is not enough, you can pay it back next time. We are not in a hurry. Quote. An old man in the lead looked at the calm Hua Yu. Then what kind of business do you do in the universe? Hua Yu shrugged. I'm a serious businessman. My younger brother is in charge of fighting, and I'm in charge of selling his spoils. To be honest, if it weren't for the fact that you are my compatriots, I can double the amount of this ecological planet and fleet sold to space refugees. Crack. He snapped his fingers, and an alien maid behind him put a small box on the table and opened it. Hua Yu took out a cigar-like object from it. This is a gift for you. It comes from an agricultural planet. The taste is much better than what you smoke, and there are no such messy things. The elders looked at each other and finally nodded together. We agree. Hua Yu smiled. Then my fleet will come in 2 months. There will be a total of 260 refitted cargo ships, 6 Tier 12 warships, 36 Tier 108 ships, 72 Tier 5 ships, Tier 4 ships, and 200 supply ships. They can carry about civilian sand more than soldiers in millions total. Discuss who you choose, and I won't get involved. Farewell. The old man in charge knocked on the table. Call all departments for a meeting. Now they owe more and more to the Hua family, and this debt is too difficult to repay. Hey Tony, how are you doing? Oh, Karma. Tony, who had just returned home, was taken aback by Hua Yu's greeting. He came to the wine cabinet to pour wine, and handed a glass to Hua Yu. When did you come back? Earth that arrived this morning. Hua Yu clapped his hands as he spoke. 2 scorching sun warriors appeared in the living room carrying oversized boxes. After putting down the boxes, they came to stand in the corner. Tony put down his wine glass and went forward to open a box, which was full of various fruit wines. After checking one by one, Tony lit a cigarette stick. It would be even better if you could bring me some high-tech things. You know that's impossible. Hua Yu got up and came to stand in front of Tony, raised his hand and touched his head. Tony, you are the 2 of us who grew up watching you. We trust you very much, but for the shield that your father used to work for today, I have to rush back to discuss business. I'll see you next time. Tony nodded silently, and asked in a low voice after a long time, why can't you take me to the universe? Hua Yu, who walked to the door, paused. You are still too young now, and many things you follow your own emotions, and there are too many things in the universe that you can't imagine, which will make you at a loss. When you have your own child and know how to be a father, I will take you to the universe to see. Is it? Tony sighed and returned to his studio. Jarvis. Yes, sir. Can you find abnormal fluctuations in the satellite? Sorry, sir, there have been no abnormal fluctuations recently. Understood. Tony began to continue to modify the new missiles he invented. The current Stark Group was suppressed by Fahrenheit Heavy Industries before, and Hanmo Group was eyeing it later. It must come up with new weapons. Maloof, how do you feel? On a barren planet, Joaquin looked at Maloof flying around with a smile, and asked proudly. At this time, Maloof was quietly suspended 2 meters above the ground, his eyes mobilized energy slightly, and the scorching laser sight penetrated a huge boulder. The next moment, his left fist hit the ground. With a slight tremor, his fist and even his entire left arm smashed into the hard ground. He retracted his arm and looked at the unscathed left hand. He grinned at Joaquin. Boss, this feels great. A body that vibrates at any time, laser vision, super speed, magnetic levitation that escapes gravity, 2 top-level self-healing abilities, and the teleportation of the Red Devil Azazel. The only difference between the super warrior with these abilities and the Kryptonians who just arrived on the Earth is strength. However, this aspect will soon be resolved. A cell from a Chinese alpha-level mutant is being bred in large numbers, and he will make up for the last flaw of the super soldier. At first, Maloof couldn't use these abilities at the same time, because the gene chain was still lacking, until a researcher found Mystique's gene table in the gene bank, and after in-depth research, all problems were solved. There is a special genetic component hidden in her cells and even genes, which can make several genes compatible and exert their strength at the same time. When more than 1,000 simplified versions of Dachau appear on the battlefield, it will be a nightmare for all enemies. The gene pool of those incense people has been established. Connors nodded, and was interrupted by a white coat running over just as he was about to speak. Mentor, we have made a new discovery on absorbing cells. Take me to have a look. Joaquin, who was waiting for Connors' report, held half a glass of wine in his left hand and blinked his eyes with a cigarette in his right hand. Emma and Dasha beside him, seeing his stupid look, were out of breath. Teacher, this is a gene from China. It was collected from a Delta-level mutant 12 years ago. His ability is very special. It is transformation and enhanced control. As long as his physical condition allows, he can fully absorb these energies and slowly transform them into control of his own abilities. Connors froze for a moment, then took a breath. Why did you only find out now? The white coat shrugged. Didn't the boss say at the time that all the genes below the Delta level were sealed up? And at that time, this gene was indeed useless to us. Recently, we needed a breakthrough in gene fusion to transfer it from the inventory. Is there a sample of his blood in the freezer? Of course. Connors felt that the three of Joaquin would not mind adding a new fragment to his gene chain, especially when he reported this ability, and seeing the excited expressions on the faces of the three, he knew that the new era of mutants would be rewarded. This confidence comes entirely from the former mutant leader, Sebastian Shaw. While absorbing and transforming energy, it can also enhance their own strength. This Delta-level gene can directly enhance ability control, and give the three of them a certain amount of time to absorb and transform. They will properly reach the Omega level, and this is just the beginning for them. A year passed quietly, and 3 special gene injectors were placed in front of Joaquin and the three of them. Connors was trembling when he picked up the injectors. After being stared at by the three, he quickly adjusted his breathing and injected them one by one. Nothing has changed. This is Dasha's most intuitive feeling. Joaquin smiled. After all, it is a Delta class. Then he got up and took the 2 of them to the high platform of the flagship center. Looking at the neat 1481 incense people below, he slowly raised his arms. Today is destined to be recorded in history for this weak group of you, because starting today, you will change your racial genes and become omnipotent gods. For nearly 7 years, there are still 2,633 elf star fragrances who followed Joaquin in his conquests. Those who died were all killed in the first 2 years. At that time, they had not been assigned nano suits. The vast majority of those who died were elders. They wanted to give the hope of survival to the younger clansmen. Therefore, when boarding a ship, the oldest ones often rushed to the front, and the other fighters were ranked in the rear according to their age. As a matrilineal race, except for men under 500 years old who were well protected, the rest also died in the battle. So now in the army standing in front of Joaquin, there are only a pitiful 300 men, and they work hard all day in the group, and they are exhausted one by one, but it only adds more than 500 children to the group, which is still counted in their stomachs. If the number of this group exceeds 7,000, it will take at least 20 years based on the calculations obtained by Connors. It still depends on their population base. After all, Joaquin, Emma, and Dasha have been together for more than years, and their stomachs have not moved yet. One can imagine how touching the probability of winning the bid is. Connors' team, using the most advanced equipment in the universe, can basically guarantee that the experimental body can perfectly inherit the genetic level after several years of improvement and upgrading. If the level is not enough, then add another injection until the quantity changes qualitatively. After they were all injected with 2 kinds of self-healing genes and awakened, the little hedgehog Gululu took a nano-injector and began to inject Edmund nano-alloy robots into their brains one by one. As for why there is Edmund alloy, naturally, it was the original stone fragments dug out from Stryker's base treasury. After all, he made 2 secondary adamantium alloy claws at the beginning, and he used these rough stones. With the Edmund nano robots in their brains, coupled with their current vibrating gold nanosuits, they can switch back and forth between vibrating gold and Edmund alloy. These 2 metals, how convenient it is. When it was their turn to inject the laser vision gene, the 3 of Joaquin lined up. When they were awakened and could not control themselves, they would move their heads to let the laser vision hit themselves. Anyway, they could absorb it. This kind of active energy supply should not be in vain. It would save them from destroying the structure of the spacecraft. After all this was over, those pregnant incense people embraced the successfully awakened clansmen. From now on, they will have the ability to protect themselves, and they will no longer have to be chased around like jackals just to survive. I, Shazili, swear to my ancestors that in the endless years to come, I am willing to dedicate everything to the great Jinn, whether it is body or soul, as long as it is Jinn's will, it is my will, Shazili. As she spoke, she knelt down in front of Joaquin and respectfully kissed his nano-combat boots. From now on, the great Jinn will rule everything about me, Sazili, forever. Following Shazili's oath, the other incense warriors lined up to swear one by one, and kissed Joaquin's combat boots. Emma and Dasha just watched everything in front of them with smiles. Standing in the corner, Tatar was greedy for the awakening of the incense people, but the researchers in the clan had already concluded that the gene extracted from humans was of no use to them Skrulls. Tatar sighed, took the cigarette stick from Boyka and lit it. Hey, I really envy those comrades in arms. Boyka patted his arm. Don't worry Tatar, Connors's genetic research on humans and incense people has almost reached the suspension stage, and they will focus on the cells of your Skrulls next. Don't worry, there is a chance. I hope so. After resolving the original promise to the incense people, Joaquin called Connors. All the remaining potions are extracted, all the materials are sealed, and the transport ship is destroyed on the spot. Emma. After meeting Connors, Joaquin looked at Emma. You watch here, after all the genes are sealed, all these catalytic chambers are deserted, and by the way, scan their brains to see who has hidden them. Emma nodded and followed Connors out of the waiting room. Joaquin took a sip from the glass handed by Dasha. Go and reorganize the fleet. All the incensemen will land on our 6 main ships, and the rest of the warships will be armed with my elder brother. Let's return to the New Elf Star where the incensemen are located. The diameter of New Elf Star reaches 2.23 kilometers, which is nearly 23.8 kilometers larger than that of the Earth. The forest area of the entire planet reaches 18.1%, and the plain land area also accounts for 30%. The rest is seawater and some freshwater lakes all over the place. Birds and beasts looking for food can be seen everywhere on the entire planet, and there is a primitive atmosphere everywhere. There is only one vast wasteland covered by rows of energy-absorbing panels, and dozens of small spaceships are constantly laying out energy-absorbing panels. Gululu, the little hedgehog, took big steps, commanding the people to walk and shuttle in the energy-absorbing board, and plugged in the connectors one by one for debugging, put the wires in place and protect them properly. After all, you will need these energy to strengthen your own abilities in the future. The incense people did not speak, but the movements of their hands were more careful. On the other side of the wasteland, in the houses made of rattan trees, from the grass blankets on the floor, the energy that was slightly hot was emitted all the time. In a primitive and sci-fi research institute, Connors and the others are working on new technologies. The cells from the Skrulls are being slowly studied by them. The energy gushing out from the grass blanket under their feet will feel that their brains are always running at high speed after being absorbed by them, which will greatly help their work efficiency. In a natural hot spring pool, Joaquin was soaking comfortably, with his right hand stretched out and his fingers stretched out, trying to extract the metal elements in the opposite ore. According to the calculation formula given by Connors, as long as he can absorb all the metal elements from the ore at will, then he will officially break through to become an Omega-level powerhouse. However, it is still difficult to break through. Now Joaquin can only mobilize the most superficial layer of elements in that ore, and cannot extract them. He can only slightly change the original position of those metal elements in the ore. For him, there is still a long way to go to extract at will. It's still too much. Joaquin sighed, leaned his head on a girl's lower abdomen, and took a deep breath of the girl's body fragrance. Go find the little hedgehog. Yes. The girl on the side teleported away, and soon brought the lazy little hedgehog Gululu over. What do you want from me? The database in your mind. Is there a device for gravity? The little hedgehog was stunned for more than 2 seconds, then nodded. Yes, it is similar to the technology currently used on spaceships and warships. Joaquin thought for a while. Can you build a gravity room for exercise? That thing is useless to you. You have the ability to get rid of the magnetic field. The little hedgehog took off his tattered leather jacket and overalls while talking, plunged into the hot spring pool, and climbed up the next moment screaming, "Okay, so hot." Joaquin looked at him like a fool. "Are you stupid? Didn't you see that the pool is bubbling? Are you still drilling into it?" Bululu shook his body on the spot, and while shaking off the water drops, some spikes were also thrown out, piercing Joaquin's face. "How big do you want me to build? Many materials and equipment are not available in the Elven Star, and we need to purchase them outside. The one that can accommodate 500 people needs 12 seats, each of which must be connected to an energy enhancement device, and another one that can accommodate 3,000 people. You pass the materials to Tatar, and he will arrange for someone to deliver them as soon as possible." The little hedgehog nodded, put on his own clothes, and tugged at the skirt of the girl who brought him over just now. "Go to my studio." "Shoo." Joaquin took a sip of fruit wine. "Hee, it's already 2002. How time flies. The Avengers will gather in a few years, the Infinity Gem and the Mind Gem, plus the Power Gem found by that tone-deaf kid who likes to dance awkwardly. As long as you have these 3 gems, who cares how Thanos snaps his fingers?" Emma, who had been silent all this time, opened her blue eyes and glanced at him. "What is a person muttering there? Have you ever heard of magic?" Emma became interested. "Magic? Is it like those wizards in ancient times, who can fly around on a broom after chanting a spell, and can also turn people into black cats or little mice?" Joaquin looked at Emma in a daze. "What are you talking about?" Emma splashed water on his face, and slowly swam over. "We don't care about that, you have to work harder. Ika has a daughter, and I haven't moved here yet. Do you prefer a son or a daughter?" Holding Joaquin's back, Emma thought for a while. "Well, I still like sons better. I heard that sons are like mothers." "Then we want a son." "Shoo." Joaquin hugged Emma and used teleportation. The girls by the hot spring pool giggled a few times before following. After all, they also wanted to be favored by the master. "Aisha, a scum like you still wants to fight for the boss." Milov kicked Aisha's head fiercely with his right foot. At this time, Aisha's nose was bruised and her mouth was swollen with few teeth left. The severe pain in her oblique ribs let her know that her ribs were almost broken. "Yeah, ah." Aisha's eyes were red. She pushed her head hard with her arms, and pushed Milov's big feet upwards, but the next moment she was stepped on the floor again with even greater force. Boom, ka. Looking at the fainted Aisha, Maluf curled his lips and kicked Aisha aside. There were already more than 20 soldiers in a coma. He looked at the people in front of him. Next, a female warrior with a magnificent figure came to Milov. "Instructor. Bring it on. Drink." The female soldier kicked Milov's neck sideways, but he raised his hand to block it, and then kicked the female soldier's lower abdomen, flying the latter into the air, knelt down on her knees and kept spitting acid water. The female soldier raised her hand to wipe the corners of her mouth, stared at Milov who was walking in, counted the timing, grasped a lump with her right hand and squeezed it hard. "Oh, Suka Buli." Bang! The little brother Maluf, who was in pain, kicked the female warrior out with hatred. The latter hit the steel wall of the gravity room, and vomited a mouthful of blood after landing. Just when Milov was about to find the next one, the female warrior stood up again. "I can still fight." "Sazali, are you sure?" Milov glanced at Shazili in surprise. She turned her head and spit blood, walked slowly towards Milov, punched Milov's chest with her right fist, turned away from Milov's kick with her eyes down, stepped forward and put her right knee on Milov's lump again. Next, glancing at the unconscious Shazili in the corner, Malov decided to take his anger out on the other fighters, so in the following time, the students in Malufu's group were in bad luck. It was good luck to have a bruised nose and a swollen face. Those who were unlucky either lost their hands or feet. Today's training is over. Maluf looked at the soldiers lying dead on the ground, clapped his hands and exited the gravity room, and turned off the special magnetic field that restricted the ability to mutate. As the magnetic field dissipated, the soldiers lying dead quickly stood up vigorously. They moved their joints and left the gravity room in 2s and 3s. Shazili and Aisha returned to Joaquin's side and continued to serve as maids. They were used to this kind of life. At least the gravity they had to bear increased from 0.5 times the initial one to 1.6 times the current one. Every day, they can find that they are a little bit stronger than yesterday. This kind of all-round physical improvement makes them willing to be beaten, so they work harder to serve Joaquin. Is it not easy to be beaten today? Joaquin, who was enjoying the massage, asked with a smile, and Shazili and the others hummed, "We disappointed the instructor yesterday, so." Scoff. Joaquin waved his hands and sat up, sneered, "That kid Maloof is trying to save face. You go to Emma's side, I'll go to Connor's to see the progress." Speaking of putting on a robe, he used teleportation to come to Connor's laboratory. Dozens of fragrant people were wearing white coats and studying beside those old scholars. They were not very old, and they belonged to the higher group after the intelligence test of the whole family. "How's it going?" Joaquin came to Connors, who was testing the somatic cells of a plant. The latter carefully injected some unknown liquid into the somatic cells with a nanoscale test tube, and then handed the glass test piece to the little apprentice beside him. Over 36,100 pieces of data have been collected, all of which are helpful to the human body. Next, as long as we keep combining and arranging the optimal combination, we can enter the experimental stage. Maloof's current physique, can it be strengthened? Connors shook his head. It can't be calculated yet, but some materials are extremely rare in the universe. Joaquin waved his hand indifferently. Then exclude the extremely rare ones first, and use the rest to calculate first. What I need are mass-produced products suitable for incense people, not one or two products that are never produced. He touched a girl's long white hair. I have high expectations for them. In my vision, their upper limit is Dachau, and their lower limit is Steve. You can ask Gululu to help you calculate some links. If the medicine is not up to standard, let him use equipment to assist. There is always a fighter that suits me. Big Superman. Connors blinked his eyes. But they can't reach the level of Superman anyway. Professor Connors. Joaquin put his hands on his shoulders and looked at each other. More than 20 years ago, did you think that we would fuse different abilities and use them at the same time? Did you imagine that you would bring your family to live in the universe more than 10 years ago? Everything is possible. You must know that there are too many high-dimensional life forms that we don't know about in this universe, such as Odin in the world of Nordic mythology, or Zeus in Western European mythology. Who can say for sure? He pointed at himself with a smile, and then tapped Connor's chest with his index finger. Do you think we are human beings or gods in other people's mouths? Since we can improve our life level through genes, why don't we amplify our ambitions? Isn't it good for us to turn ourselves into gods? How long will you live now? Connors shook his head blankly. In theory, as long as I keep absorbing energy, I can live for a long time. Joaquin shrugged. Isn't that right? What's the difference between your current lifespan and those gods in legends? The same longevity, the same youthfulness, it's just that the strength is not as good as the other party. As long as we make up for this shortcoming, aren't we new gods? Perhaps you are right. Connors took a deep breath. I know what to do. Come on. Joaquin patted his arm with a smile, and left the research room, while several young apprentices around Connors surrounded him with excitement. Teacher, can we also become gods? Connors looked at the steamy students and smiled. Sooner or later, we will become gods. Human desires are endless. Connors, who was hired by Joaquin at the beginning, only wanted to restore his arm lost due to the war through the mutant gene provided by Joaquin, and he did it. Looking at his newly grown arm, he thought he could have more powerful power, and then he did it again. Even now he can live forever, but he still wants to get more, such as enjoying the worship of the world. Joaquin returned to his residence, but got a surprise. Emma actually vomited, which made him smart, and brought Connors over, who had just finished drinking the poisonous chicken soup. Quick, hurry, check Emma to see if she is pregnant. Pregnant? Connors glanced suspiciously at Emma's flat belly, but Joaquin slapped him hard on the back of the head. What do you mean? Connors. Sorry boss, I was distracted. He. Connors took the small instrument handed over by the student, pressed it on Emma's finger, and a drop of blood flowed into the test tank, and soon the instrument started to move. Drip. The downward trend of red blood cells matches the characteristics. Congratulations on giving birth to a new life. I'm going to be a dad. Joaquin held Connors' big, confused face and rubbed it vigorously. I'm going to be a father. Can you let go? Connors pouted his big lips. Congratulations boss. Joaquin pushed Connors away, stepped forward and carefully hugged Emma. You are going to be a mother. It's not easy for this child to come, woo woo woo. At this moment, Emma was emotional. She snuggled into Joaquin's arms. I thought we had killed too many people and done so many bad things, and God would not give us a child. I didn't expect the little guy to finally come. Jin, I'm so happy. I want to tell Dasha the good news, Emma said using telepathy, and found Dasha in the crowd on the other side of the new elf star. At this time, Dasha embraced from left to right and enjoyed her face. Sister, I'm pregnant. Twitter. Hey, little girl, you smell so good. In a private jet, the carefree Tony sat on the sofa, eyes blocked by sunglasses, squinting leeringly at Shazili back and forth, and glanced at Aisha next to him from time to time. Shazili bent down and poured fruit wine for Tony. Thank you for the compliment. Actually, I'm in Manhattan Bay, and I have a very impressive big villa with a new water bed I invented. Do you want to experience it with me? Kai Gugwo's contracting behavior was nothing to the two Shongren. When they were fighting in the universe people under their hands had words 10 times worse than this, and they had long been immune. Aisha crossed her legs, revealing her calf as white as jade, and her little toe was swayed by nano high-heeled shoes, which swayed, and the sway also entered Tony's heart. Our body and mind belong to the master, so you don't have to worry about it. Shazili looked at Tony's small body hollowed out by the wine. Seriously, sir, your physical fitness is too weak, you should exercise more when you have time. Tony shrugged his shoulders with a rascal face. How do you know I'm not fit if you don't try? Seeing that the two of them no longer paid attention to him, Tony didn't bother to strike up a conversation. He casually flipped through the magazines to see if there was any supermodel that caught his eye. When Tony got off the plane, he bumped into the other two guests who were invited. Aha, Aunt Peggy, I didn't expect you to come too. Steve, who was ignored by him, smiled. Hey, Tony, I'm your elder anyway. Forget it. Tony let go of Carter, and lightly punched Steve in the chest. To be honest, Steve, except for the decades you spent as a popsicle, your mental age is not as old as mine. Quote question mark. Quote. Seeing that her husband was deflated, Carter reached out and touched Tony's older face. How do you talk, kid? Recently, your gossip news has become more and more outrageous. Tony looked at Carter's beautiful face, a little envious. I really envy the power you have. Son, you shouldn't envy us. With this power, you need to shoulder enough responsibilities. To be honest, Tony, I've been tired all these years. Looking at the tiredness in Carter's eyes, Tony nodded and changed the subject. How about my newly invented individual equipment? Not bad. Steve followed the two with a smile, and walked towards the car not far away. When he came to the door of the car, he was still attracted by the beauty of Shazili and Aisha, and was pinched by the smiling Carter. Oh. He let out a cry of pain, and awkwardly smiled and nodded with the two people in front of the car door, and got the other party's smile. After getting in the car, Tony started acting like a monster again. I'll just say it, Steve is not as honest as you think. Tony. Carter patted him angrily. Even as a woman, I am attracted by their beauty, let alone Steve. Did you vent your anger on Steve because you were deflated in front of them? I don't. Tony hastily denied it, and Steve sniffed it. It smells so good in the car. It should be an alien perfume. Carter replied casually, and then looked at Tony on the opposite side. How can you sell powerful weapons to the desert? Don't you know that we are carrying out missions there? Tony opened the freezer and poured fruit wine for the three of them. You know, Stark Group wants to survive, so we can't give up our main business. Anyway, this is our old tradition, isn't it? Before Carter could speak, he hurriedly changed the topic. Why did you let Nick take your seat? That kid doesn't look like a good guy. Steve smiled and said nothing. Carter gave Tony a white look. I'm tired, actually. After completing this task, Steve and I want to take a long vacation. Pierce is holding on to the right. Does anyone else have Nick's courage? Plus, I watched this kid grow up, so I'm very relieved to give it to him. I bought an island in the Maldives, you know. Carter touched Tony's head with a smile. Thank you, son. Steve and I still have some savings. We plan to live a normal life. He will become a fitness instructor and I will be a teacher. This is what we discussed. I see. Tony nodded and stopped talking. Carter patted his arm, his eyebrows slightly frowned. Isn't this kid too weak? The welcome car, which was lengthened soon, drove into an antique garden. The three of them looked at the scenery of the garden and couldn't help sighing. With their meager history and culture, they couldn't think of how to praise this forest garden. They could only say dryly, "It's so beautiful. This forest garden is indeed very beautiful." Every time Yu came back these years, he would transplant some ornamental alien plants and plant them in the forest garden. After the gardener repaired it, it would be a lie to say that it is not beautiful. Especially in the evening, dots of fluorescent light emerged from some vines. Even if the lights were not turned on, it would not feel dim. Small bugs of various colors were flickering, flying up and down wantonly. Tony reached out and tapped on a vine, centering on the place where his fingers touched. Circles of waves of light spread around. Wow! A few people sighed, and followed the servants to the banquet hall. There were only 8 round tables in the huge banquet hall. There were already many people sitting at the tables, chatting first in 2s and 3s. Victor put his arms around Sarava and waved to Tony. "Hey, Tony, come and sit here." Tony smiled and stepped forward to hug Victor, then hugged the little guy in Sarava's arms. "Haha, call Uncle, Uncle will buy you an airplane, not that kind of toy airplane." "Ah, ah." The little guy stretched out his chubby little hand, patted Tony's cheek lightly, and stuck out his little tongue with a grin, as cute as he could be. Tony looked at Victor. "Where's your Shanna?" Sarava pointed to a small door in the banquet hall. "I'm going to see the young master." "I'll go take a look too." Speaking of returning the little guy to Sarava, he walked towards the door with a carefree attitude, but was stopped politely by 2 girls in red cheongsams. "Sorry sir, the little master is breastfeeding." "Okay." Shrugging his shoulders, Tony returned to Victor's table, started to smoke, looked at the little one in Sarava's arms, and put the cigarette back. Victor smiled when he saw this. "Let's go outside and have a chat." Seeing this, Carter also followed out, and Steve got up and smiled at Sarava. "Madam, your child is very cute." "Thank you. I heard that your arc creatures have potions that suppress mutant abilities." Carter crossed his arms and looked at the smiling Victor, who nodded. "Yes, that potion is specially given to Epsilon-level mutants, and the original intention is to allow them to return to normal life." "Is there any problem?" "Woo." Tony puffed out the smoke ring. "Doesn't that mean it can also suppress the abilities of alpha-level mutants?" Victor did not deny. The leech serum can't eradicate the ability of an alpha-level mutant, but it will suppress it for a period of time, and the time depends on how the mutant uses the ability. We invited Eric to do an experiment. After only 2 months, he was able to use the magnetic field ability again, and he recovered his original strength in half a year. "That's it." Carter nodded. "As you know, many organizations are now focusing their attention on those mutants, and the above has even issued a decree that mutants must be registered. If you want to implement it, the leech gene is indispensable." "I don't care about this matter, I have to ask the old man." Victor put out the cigarette butt. "As you know, the 4 Cs and the Ark are now under the management of the old man, and I have to remind you that even if the old man allows us to trade leech serum, you can't use it on us. It's only fools who will get your ideas." Tony smiled at the side. "You invented the leech serum, there must be a corresponding medicine to relieve it, right?" "Not at all." Victor shrugged. "There is no antidote to the leech gene, because this gene was extracted from the cells of a mutant." After finishing speaking, he looked at Carter and Steve. "You two don't want your abilities to be cancelled, do you? You only have gamma-level mutant abilities. Once you are injected with leech serum, you will really become your original appearance. After all, there is an insurmountable gap between alpha level and gamma level. Think about it for yourself. Once those politicians make up their minds to deal with you, do you really think you will be fine?" After Victor finished speaking, he went back to the banquet hall, leaving the thinking Carter and his wife behind, while Tony was slowly smoking a cigarette. Anyway, these things have nothing to do with him, he is just an ordinary person. Although I shouldn't speak, as a friend or family member, I still need to remind you that this is the 21st century, and this is the world of capital, and people are all selfish. Carter. Tony looked at the couple with a serious look on his face. "You ask them to buy a batch of them to catch the enemy. Don't tell those politicians that you have the genetic medicine to suppress mutants, otherwise not only those politicians will pester you, but also those powerful mutants will not make it easy for you. You know this better than anyone else. Think about Eric back then, why did he assassinate the president?" After speaking, He put his hands in his pockets and entered the banquet hall. Carter looked at the fireflies flying around and sighed. I'm tired, Steve, I'm really tired. Then let's live the lives of ordinary people. I believe Nick will handle it well. Steve put his arms around Carter's shoulders, and the two cuddled together and stopped talking. Haha, this little guy doesn't look like you at all. Tony teased the little guy in his arms with sour words. The little guy who just had a baby face opened his big eyes and looked at Tony curiously. He waved his hands and kicked his legs with his tongue sticking out, as if he was very dissatisfied with Tony's words. Before Joaquin could take over the child, the little one was held in Carter's arms first. She and Steve have been busy performing missions for the past few years, so they don't have time to think about these things. Naturally, they love children very much. Steve nodded on the little guy's mouth. What's the child's name? Wish. His name is Hua Yuan. Hua Wei walked over with a smile. This child is Joaquin's eldest son, so I named him a Wish, hoping that he can respond to those souls who pray to him in the future. It's such a profound feeling. Tony shrugged, grimacing. It's a good name. The banquet was very lively, and those who could be invited were those who were closest to Fahrenheit. Zheng Xian from the Spear Bureau came to Carter with a smile on his glass and said, Director Carter. Director Zheng. The two smiled tacitly, and came to the corner of the banquet hall with wine glasses in their hands. Asazo and Wilson sat down beside Steve, and Wilson raised his glass. Hey, Captain America Steve, I toast you. Thank you. After a round of toasting, Joaquin brought Tony to a guest room, and Sazali came in with a tray with a syringe on it. Tony raised his eyebrows. Wow, am I going to become a Superman too? What are you thinking? Joaquin picked up the injection with a smile. This is a medicine specially prepared for you. You have indulged yourself too much these past few years, Tony. As he said that, he stuck the needle into Tony's arm vein, and as the lavender drug was injected, Tony closed his eyes tightly and waited for the pain to come, but Joaquin slapped his head. What are you thinking? I will inject you with a low-end drug. Putting the syringe on the tray, they clapped their hands, and two fragrant girls walked in. The two of them will sleep next to you tonight. It will be very good for your recovery, don't worry about those messy thoughts. As the door closed, Tony looked around and shrugged. This will make it difficult for me. Crack. One of the girls slapped him directly on the back of the head, and the other girl pulled out the ribbon she had prepared from her waist, tied Tony who had fallen asleep tightly, and then clapped her little hands. Sleep. This night Tony slept very deeply and comfortably. He had neither dreamed nor felt the itching caused by the strengthening of his body when he entered the deep sleep. When he opened his eyes again, it was already the morning of the next day. He got up and went to the bathroom. After taking a shower, he wiped off the steam on the mirror. Looking at himself who was 7 or 8 years younger, and his handsome figure, he nodded. Okay, this feels good. When he changed into his clothes and came to the living room, Carter and Steve couldn't help but take a closer look at Tony, who had changed a lot. The dark circles under his eyes disappeared, and the acne from staying up late for a long time disappeared. His bright eyes, steady steps, and overall improved energy made him feel strange to familiar people. Wow, I can't believe it. You haven't touched the little girl all night. Has it changed so much? Facing Carter's teasing, Tony shrugged. In fact, Jin called 2 girls for me last night. Joaquin came to the living room and looked at Tony. It's not bad, the main reason is that your body was too short, and your current physical fitness is similar to those of the second-generation fighters. Why not transform me into a real super soldier? Tony complained a little. After all, with his relationship with Jin, all of this was easy to achieve. Joaquin glanced at him. As long as you are willing to change Stark Industries, as long as you give up your clever mind bestowed by God, I will transform you. Are you willing? Forget it. You know, the entire Stark Industries supports more than 6 workers, and I have to be responsible for them. Joaquin spread his hands. Look, you didn't change careers in Stark Industries, but you suddenly became a super soldier. Do you think this is a good thing for you? Tony made a zipper gesture. Who knows if I don't tell? Tony, I watched you grow up. How many days do you think you can hold back? 3 days or 5 days? Looking at the smiling Joaquin, Tony said silently, well, at least my current physical fitness is not bad. From now on, you will be responsible for helping me maintain my health, and I will pay you for it. Joaquin waved his hand. Stop going to those dubious receptions in the future, who knows if there are any bad things about you. I'm going to take Emma and the children back to New Elf Star today. If someone wants to deal with you in the future, if you think you have little chance of winning, you can go to Victor or Wilson. After all, you play better. In such a hurry. Yes. Joaquin spread his right hand. Some black substances slowly emerged on the floor, gathered in his palm, and finally formed a drop of black viscous liquid. I'm about to break through to the Omega level, I have to go back and work harder. A second Omega. Carter muttered something to himself, buried the fear in his heart, and Joaquin glanced at him. Don't think so badly of me, there is nothing on the earth that can attract my attention for now, so it will be hard to say in the future. In order to avoid embarrassment when we meet in the future, be optimistic about Tony and my company. I see. Tony was moved after hearing his last sentence, and hugged Joaquin. Thank you. As long as you don't do too much, I'll help you with anything. Let's have breakfast. Joaquin patted him on the back with a smile. Seriously, Tony, the road of military industry is not a long-term solution. The ARC group is already preparing to transform into new energy sources. Do you want to join? This is really great news for me. After hearing his words, Joaquin didn't say much, and took a few people to the restaurant for dinner. After getting off the plane, Tony called Pepper. Pepper, you should contact Fahrenheit Heavy Industries now. We will take over their technology and some equipment. The price has been negotiated. Next will be the Stark Industrial Era. Don't forget to inform Uncle Obadiah. Haha, Tony, last night. Happy opened the car door, looked at the younger Tony, and was dazed for a while. Tony patted his shoulder. Last night was an unforgettable night, buddy, don't be dazed, we will be very busy in the next few days. Okay, boss. Watching the luxury car drifting away, Steve and Carter, carrying big bags and small bags of alien specialties, shook their heads and got into the car prepared by the ARC group, and returned to their warm little home. After tidying up their things, the couple stood in front of a counter, looked at the two battle suits inside, and the vibrating gold buckler leaning on the side. Carter dialed Nick's phone. Are you free tonight? Come to my house for dinner. I have something to tell you. Bring Hill and Coulson. On the other side, Nick Fury, who was looking up information in the office, heard the exhaustion in Carter's words, sighed and pressed the internal number of the landline. Hill, bring Coulson to my office. Knock knock knock. Soon Hill knocked on the door and walked in. Behind him, Coulson closed the door with his backhand. Sir, is there something urgent for us? Nick shook his head. Peggy asked the three of us to go to her house for dinner tonight. Isn't this pretty good? Hill was a little puzzled. It's been very difficult recently. It's just that we can give ourselves a vacation. Forget it, you'll know when you go tonight. Nick rubbed his face. Have any useful information been obtained from various places during this time? Hill shook his head. It's a small matter in our homeland, and there is no big news in other places, but there is something interesting in Europe. I heard that someone saw the legendary vampire and was deprived of his purity. Ku Kai, Guy. Coulson covered his mouth and smiled awkwardly for a while. Sorry, I couldn't hold back. The corner of Nick's mouth twitched. Leave that alone, anyway, we are not in our country. There are always some righteous fighters who will deal with it. Are there others? Coulson quickly wiped away the tears from his laughter, and thought for a while. I got a rather interesting piece of information. General Ross found a young man from somewhere. He is researching the third stage of super soldier serum. The research was going well, but the research progress was stopped not long ago. Oh, failed. Nick felt a little more at ease. As early as the second stage of Ross's super soldier serum came out, he wanted to ask for some, but was rejected by the other party. He didn't expect the third stage to fail. This is good news. No, Coulson shook his head. I heard that the scientist came up with a new research direction. Steve was created with the blessing of the life ray, so he chose another ray gamma. What does this have to do with his research on genetic medicine? Building gamma ray machines is very slow, so they have suspended the progress of the genetic medicine, and are lobbying everywhere for research and development funds. If there is no accident, they will need to get enough funds by the end of the year or next year, unless Ross is willing to sell his super soldier phase 1 genetic medicine. Speaking of this, the three of them couldn't help but look at each other, and Coulson said, Sir, Ross is not that good, is he? Nick sneered. It's hard to say. Researching a genetic medicine that is comparable to or surpassing Steve's will be very beneficial to his future promotion, and he can also master an army of super soldiers. At that time, he will not be afraid of pressure from Congress. How do you choose? I'm going to monitor his every move. Coulson was about to go out as he spoke, but was stopped by Nick. This is just the worst plan. He is still in the lobbying stage, and he wants to implement it not so fast. Come with me to Ms. Peggy's house tonight. I have a bad feeling. Hill thought for a while. Is she really going to step down from the position of director? You must know that she has given everything for S.H.I.E.L.D. She's tired. Nick's words silenced the two. Polivier Tresk looked at the cells under the microscope, which were rapidly transitioning from active to dead in the test piece. He couldn't help but sighed, took off his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. It still doesn't work. Where is the problem? At this time, a young man in a white coat handed over a cup of coffee. Take a rest, teacher, you have been fighting for 4 days in a row, and if you don't rest, your body will collapse. Suck, suck. Polivier sipped his coffee, put down his cup for a long time and complained, do you think I don't want to rest? Isn't it urgent from above? With his short body, he sat on the chair with difficulty, and let the assistant on the side light a cigarette for him. Rostu dug out a genius banner from somewhere, and made his super soldier plan reach the threshold of the third phase. The leaders above us also want to perform well, and strive to climb up in the next general election, so I can only work harder here. The little assistant also sighed. It would be great if Colonel Stryker was still around. Strike, huh? Bolivar snorted coldly. Don't mention that idiot to me. If he hadn't provoked Fahrenheit Brothers and Mutant Academy at the same time, his current achievements would definitely not be inferior to mine. I, an old man, still spend all day in the laboratory. The little assistant took Bolivier's research report, and after reading it for a long time, he finally understood why his progress was stuck. The young man's mind was always turning very fast, so he gave an opinion to his respected mentor. He came to his computer and sat down, opened the list of gene pools, entered a few keywords, and soon a photo appeared on the computer screen, printed it out and handed it to Polivier, who closed his eyes and meditated. Teacher, have you studied this mutant? Okay. Bolivar took a look, and raised his bushy eyebrows. Mystique. The little assistant nodded and squatted beside Polivier to explain. I think so, teacher. The first-generation Sentinel is essentially a robot with a database of mutants added, and the second-generation Sentinel can only use a fixed ability. Due to the limitation of materials, its power is only Delta level. He breathed a sigh of relief and sorted out his thoughts. Now we have already figured out the restricted materials. The most important fusion transformation. You still can't break through the technical barriers, so can you change your thinking? Speaking of this, he nodded on Rui Wen's profile picture. We have a huge gene pool, but we can't use it on Sentinels. Maybe this mutant will give us the answer. After all, she can change into other people at will, even her fingerprints, pupils and voice are the same. Bolivar nodded. I will talk to Charles. Before that, I will go to an old friend's house for a dinner. The little assistant yawned and started to tidy up the messy laboratory. He was just an intern who just graduated, and he was already very excited to be arranged to study next to him. Bolivar carried his briefcase, got out of the research institute and got on the special car, and told the driver, notify, encourage some mutants to make trouble, but don't make too much trouble. The driver who was driving nodded. Okay sir, I see. Pierce has been very quiet lately. The driver glanced at Bolivar in the rearview mirror while driving. He is now in contact with Warwick, intending to swallow Warwick's power in New York. The news below says that Warwick seems to be showing signs of letting go. Oh, Bolivar, who was looking at the scenery outside the window, made a long voice, tapped his stubby fingers on his knees, took out his mobile phone and dialed a number for a long time. Modu, are you interested in taking over the scattered forces in New York? The voice on the other side of the phone was very magnetic. Don't be joking, Bolivier, don't test me for Pierce, I just guard my territory and you don't bother me. No, maybe we should take some time to talk. Bolivar smiled lightly. For the time being, you help me take over the Hydra forces in New York and several nearby states. After I perfect the Sentinel-3, I will help your children awaken the mutant ability of Alpha. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the phone. the mutants are no longer considered a threat. Do you think that all the mutants are vegetarians? Don't worry about how I got the X gene, just tell me, will you make this deal? I'll meet you in New York tomorrow, and let's talk about it in detail. Polivier hummed lightly, hung up the phone, took out a cigarette and lit it. Have you found a suitable mutant target? The driver nodded. There are 2 targets, both young men who have just awakened. One controls the fire and the other controls the ice. Our people are watching. Send someone to inject them with inhibitory serum. It will be too late if Charles finds out. The driver made a promise, turned the steering wheel to the right, and the armored car merged into a new traffic flow. Ding dong, ding dong. Come on. As the door opened, the first thing that caught Steve's eyes was Nick's big bald head, followed by his little fanboy Coulson, and Hill, who was equivalent to Peggy's adopted daughter. Come in, Peggy was talking about you just now. Really, that would be an honor. Nick smiled and entered the apartment he used to come to first. Looking at the landscape photos on the wall that the 2 of them took together while performing tasks, there was only a blessed smile on his face. Hey, Steve. Steve, who was pouring water for them, looked at Nick with some puzzlement. What's wrong? You're a lucky old fellow. Looking at the group photo of Nick's fingers, Steve grinned like a fool. Thank you. Coulson, who was standing in front of the uniform display case, took the water glass with some flattery, and pointed to the display case. Captain, can you take some photos for me later? Sign your name by the way. Hee, no problem. Steve patted Coulson on the shoulder. How about your mission recently? Did you find anything? Not yet. Coulson shook his head. Nick had discussed with them when he came here. As long as it was not a critical matter, there was no need to mention it in front of them, so as not to make them worry about tasks that they had or did not have even if they retired. Hill took off his coat, rolled up his sleeves and stood in the kitchen, beckoning Carter, and said some unimportant things. By the way, recently, some powerful agents have emerged from Mousy. As long as it doesn't touch our own interests or endanger human safety, don't worry about them. Carter slowly cut the asparagus. Mark those agents who are outstanding, and let our people deal with them when they encounter them in the future. I see. Chapter 71. Wow, it's really rich tonight. Nick and Hill on the opposite side looked at the golden and crispy roasted turkey on the dining table, and nostalgia flashed in their eyes. I haven't eaten Auntie's roasted turkey for many years. Carter cut a big piece for him, and patted his shoulder when he took back the knife and fork. Son, you have already reached the time to start a family and start a business. It's time to find a girl to take care of your daily life. You know, I'm so busy all day long, and my job is dangerous. I don't want my other half to worry about me. Nick ate the chicken with big mouthfuls. Where are you and Steve planning to go on honeymoon? Go to Miami and enjoy the sun and sand, and then it's time to go to school and be a teacher. Carter drank his red wine. Tomorrow I will hold an internal meeting, and you will naturally take the position of director, but you have to give Pierce enough respect for him. After all, he has given everything for S.H.I.E.L.D. I adopted you when you were a child, but it was Pierce who led you in, and he will definitely be on your side no matter what. Quote. I plan. Ding dong, ding dong. The sudden ringing of the doorbell interrupted Nick's next words. Steve got up and opened the door. Please. Where's the person? Hi, Steve. Polivel's greeting made Steve bow his head and smile a little embarrassedly. Sorry. Professor Polivier. Carter's voice made Steve sideways and raised his right hand. Please come in, Professor Polivier. Thank you. When Polivier came to the living room, Carter also arranged the vacant seats, and thoughtfully found Mazza for him to sit comfortably. I know you don't like turkey, so I specially prepared grilled sea bass for you. Carter put the plate in front of him. I haven't cooked officially for several years. I hope you will be satisfied with my craftsmanship. Thank you, ma'am. A table of people was eating dinner slowly. Although this Bolivier belonged to S.H.I.E.L.D., he was a logistics researcher from Pierce's group, and he was not very familiar with Nick and the others. Carter drank the red wine. Nick, maybe Professor Polivier can help you with the issue of mutants in the future. Oh, Nick made a long sound, and after thinking for a while, his eyes lit up. Sentry. Okay. Carter looked at the wide-eyed Nick appreciatively. The number of registered mutants has not increased in recent years, but has decreased year by year. You should know the key to this. Nick put down his knife and fork with a solemn expression, and poured wine for several people. Xavier College mainly recruits mutants above the Epsilon level and Gamma level, those mutants who are really powerful and don't like to be controlled by others. This gave other forces an opportunity. They promised a lot of money or other conditions to recruit those powerful mutants for their own use. Those who disobeyed would be caught in a way, and their genes would help those forces to create super fighters one after another. Quote, so my Sentinel project was mentioned again by General Levi's, and a new round of research upgrades began. Polivier slowly dismembered the perch on the plate. The first generation and second generation Sentinels have various defects, so as early as 2 years ago, I started to study the third generation Sentinels. Everything else was going well, but recently it was blocked by a problem. Quote, he stuffed a piece of perch into his mouth. For example, facing a mutant of the fire control department, the Sentinel will turn the surface into diamonds or ice after contact, so as to break through the opponent's ability barrier at close range. Facing the mutant of ice control, the sentry can turn into a shell of flames to prevent itself from being frozen, and solve the opponent by the way. Hearing his introduction, the eyes of everyone in the room lit up. If there were such sentries, only 2 or 3 of them could kill Gamma level or even Alpha level mutants. The prospect is very bright. But then he poured cold water on everyone. Now my research is stuck on how to successfully complete the energy transformation and the most critical core function. He put down the knife and fork, took out the briefcase from the chair behind him, and handed a concept map to Nick on the left. In my vision, every Sentinel robot has at least 6 abilities of ice, fire, electricity, laser, diamond, and steel. The weapons are their hands and the ability to carry them. Glancing at Nick, who was very interested, the corners of his mouth curled up. If a new energy source can be found to replace the micro-reactor I imagined, then its battery life and its own capabilities will definitely reach the Gamma level. After a few people digested his prospects for the Sentinels, he threw out a piece of cake. Just imagine, everyone, a controllable multifunctional weapon, a Sentinel core that fully obeys orders, and there is no need for 1,000 more. What forces can endanger our beautiful country? Steve took the concept map, looked at the picture of the Sentinel robot on it, shrugged and handed it to Carter, who frowned after seeing the expected parameters of the Sentinel, as the cost too high. Polivier shook his head. This is my estimated cost. If there are more powerful replaceable energy devices, theoretically the price of each sentry can be reduced by 1/3, which is only the cost of a main battle tank. Picking up the wine glass and taking a sip of red wine, now there are 3 main difficulties. The first is the free switching and transformation of energy. The second is the production materials of the sentries. After all, when we meet Magneto, these sentries will become scrap iron as soon as he waves his hand. The third is the energy problem. According to your estimation, how long will it take for us to see the finished product? Glancing at Nick, who was very interested, he tapped the table with his stubby fingers. This requires your help. I think a key element is in a mutant. I need her blood and some skin tissue for research. Mystique. Hill, who had been silent all this time, involuntarily focused his gaze on Carter's face. Eric won't agree. Nick didn't think so. Just convince Charles, and he will explain the rest to his compatriots. Carter looked at the Sentinel who was more than 3 meters tall in the concept map, and then thought about the Fahrenheit brothers who had been hiding in Aliens, and the Hydra organization that had been lurking for decades, and finally she looked at Polivier. We will go to Xavier School the day after tomorrow. You must bring your sincerity, otherwise it will be difficult for me to speak for you. Polivier nodded unsurprisingly. All registered mutants, as long as they don't violate the law, they can live in this land to their heart's content. As agreed at the beginning, if it weren't for those evil forces who used mutants to do bad things, I am already enjoying my retirement life now. The atmosphere at the dining table became quiet for a while, and 5 pairs of eyes looked at the pensive Carter. The latter rested his head on his left hand and pondered for a long time before looking at Polivier. Professor, if all the materials are prepared for you, how long will it take you to produce the finished product? Polivier roughly calculated. This is really uncertain. First of all, I am not sure whether the Mystique's gene is really useful. Secondly, in terms of energy, small nuclear reactors have been unable to produce samples, let alone micro-reactors. We still have to spend time on energy. I don't know when I can overcome these 2 points alone. I can only say that I will try my best. Carter nodded and looked at her husband, Steve. Peggy, this is not a good idea. Steve naturally knew what Peggy meant, because when he was salvaged, something was sent to the base. He shook his head firmly. I mean really, Peggy, have you forgotten how we won that war in the first place? Once you take that thing out for research and use, I don't think other forces will look at it, especially the lurking Hydra. Looking at Steve's admonishing eyes, Carter compromised. Okay. 10 years, if the professor still hasn't found a suitable energy source after 10 years, then Nick will take that thing out for the professor to study. Peggy. Carter patted Steve's big hand on his shoulder, and looked at the thoughtful Polliver opposite. Professor, there may be two people you've heard of but haven't seen. You can ask Nick for a copy of their information. I won't say much about the others, but I have to remind you of one thing. Whether it's the Hydra lurking in the dark, the messy vampire werewolves, or the mutants who are still strong, they are far less dangerous than those two brothers. Quote. Two brothers. Polliver looked at Nick Fury curiously. Tell me about it. It is good. Nick sorted out the information about Joaquin and Yu in his mind. Joachim, the chairman of the ARC biological group, awakened the self-healing X gene in May of '72, and was taken away by Stryker in late June, and was locked up on 3 Mile Island for 6 years of experiments. Since their brothers have gone to the universe to develop, they naturally look down on the backward Earth. There is no need for Ms. Carter to be so wary of them, right? You do not understand. Carter smiled wryly. When you have the opportunity to deal with them, you will find that the two brothers are humble and friendly on the surface, but their behavior style is worse than those hidden forces. No one can guarantee that any idiot with a brain twitch will one day find trouble in Washaw on a whim. Regardless of the Spear Bureau in China, their ever-changing weapons alone are enough for us to drink a pot, even if they can cause heavy losses to China, but once they contact the Fahrenheit brothers, I can guarantee that the Earth will never be peaceful in the future. Quote. Polliver felt that Carter was making a fuss. They are just alpha-level mutants. Don't forget that we also have them here. We also have no shortage of transformed super soldiers. It's always good to have more weapons, isn't it? Carter's eyes flashed. They have been in the universe for 7 years, who knows what level they have developed now. Didn't you send agents to collect information? It's useless. Nick took his question and began to answer. Washaw has strict precautions against this aspect. Our people have never been able to get in touch with their internal middle levels. In the past 2 years, they bought a few of them. In less than a week, these people who were bought were all in jail. I can't guarantee how effective the Sentinel I developed will be. Carter smiled. It doesn't matter, Professor, as long as the weapon you develop can suppress gamma-level mutants one-on-one, it would be even better if 2 or 3 can siege them. Polliver nodded. I want to get Mystique's skin tissue and gene samples as soon as possible. I was still having a headache at first, but now this problem is troublesome to the director. Carter didn't speak, just looked at Nick with a smile, and the latter shrugged. Okay. I know what to do. Professor, there is one more thing I want to ask you. Polliver took a sip of the wine. Sir, tell me. Carter glanced at everyone present. Do you think mutants will be the final point of our human evolution? Polliver shook his head. Yes and no. He took out his cigarette for a moment, then lit it and took a puff, and took the ashtray handed by Hill. Actually, this is a paradox. As more and more mutants are awakened, after they combine with ordinary people, the probability of their children awakening is much higher than that of ordinary people, and these X genes are uncontrollable. Over the years, haven't your SHIELDs captured fewer mutants? After awakening their superpowers, they often lose their original minds and claim to be gods. The damage they cause is obvious to all. If someone awakens the ability about time, guess what we human beings will eventually go to? Quote. Polliver dusted off the soot. If someone can manipulate time at will, if he makes the Earth go back to the era of slash and burn farming, will we and the people we care about still exist in the world? This, Nick, who has always taken the safety of the world as his own responsibility, blinked his only remaining eye, and glanced at Carter, who also had this concern, and the two nodded tacitly. Wow, wow, wow. The cry of the newborn resounded in the sky above New Elf Star, and Joaquin took his little son with a smile, with thinning hair, a small flat nose, wrinkled and not round at all. Connors, who was standing by the side, hurried forward to take out the prepared blood-sucking test tube, gently poke the baby's index finger with a small needle, then squeezed out 2 drops of blood into the test tube, nodded to Joaquin, and teleported back to his laboratory. The little guy will definitely be naughty in the future. Emma, who was holding Yuan sleeping soundly beside her, tapped the little guy's mouth with her finger. Now Dasha doesn't have to envy me. Of course. Dasha, who had recovered to normal, took a shower and changed into her nightgown, and took the son from Joaquin's hands, her eyes filled with maternal love. What's the name? Hua Yao. Joaquin waved his hand, and the 2 maids took the leech clone away and dealt with it. I hope the light of this child will shine in the entire universe. Dasha kissed Hua Yao on the forehead. The name and meaning are great. Boss, the effect of the new genetic medicine has been tested. Connors put the virtual screen in front of Joaquin, who was holding his 2 sons in his arms. In the video, Shazili, a warrior, can still carry a 7-kilogram barbell under a load of 219 times the gravity, complete 30 squats, and run 100 meters back and forth 10 times in a total of 4 minutes and 57 seconds. What about actual combat? Connors grinned. The 5 of Malov plus Konasova and the other 6, without using any abilities, relying on the advantage of numbers, they can subdue the newly strengthened Sazali. If Sazali is equipped with weapons, then Malufu and the others will go up for nothing. Joaquin nodded in satisfaction. Mass production without side effects, the priority will be given to Maluf and the Shangren warriors, followed by the newly born Shangren infants. Ah, Connors touched his nose. There is no material, boss. Joaquin gave me a teasing expression. Go buy, go grab, go steal, I don't care what method you use, you have to make at least copies for me, or use other materials instead or upgrade to the next generation. The most important material is deep in the crust of planet Mar. The crystal in our hands was purchased by Mr. Hua Yu. I heard that it was sold to him by a fugitive Martian. This crystal is regarded as a sacred object by the Martian civilization, and only their royal family can use it. Mars. Joaquin handed the 2 sleeping children with their fingers in their mouths to Emma and Dasha, and brought Connors outside the house. The 2 lit cigarettes and smoked slowly. After a long time, Joaquin asked, how are their strengths? Ordinary Martians are similar to ordinary people on the Earth, but their royal family is very powerful. We haven't collected any information about their royal family. We only heard that their royal family has received the blessings of the gods and has the ability to destroy heaven and earth. Hey, after listening to Connor's narration, Joaquin sneered, if it's really that powerful, why didn't it make it into the list of the strongest civilizations in the universe? Go and call Malov and the others over. Yes, Joaquin took out the interstellar communicator, and soon Hua Yu's figure appeared on the projection. In the past few days, Maluf will take people to your place, find the Mar who traded with you, and ask about the specific location of their civilization. You send people to prepare to take over their planet. I see. After Hua Yu hung up the communication, he rubbed his sore eyes, moved his arms and thighs away, and pressed the pager on the bedside table. Call Zhang Cheng and the others, and wait for me in the living room. He got up and walked into the bathroom, changed into a nightgown after washing up, then walked to the living room with figure of sight steps, sat on the sofa, and the maid who stood by immediately lit a cigar and poured delicious fruit wine for him. How many planets are left? Zhang Cheng, who had just arrived, clicked on the virtual screen he carried with him, swiped and swiped a few times before reporting. During this period, we have recovered 27 habitable planets and sold 13 of the cheapest ones. The rest of the interstellar refugees can't afford it, and other civilizations are too far away. That's it. Hua Yu nodded. Then keep it and don't rush to sell it. After all, some exiled civilizations will take a fancy to it and notify the Conqueror Second Legion to return and prepare to take over the new planet. By the way, bring the Mar from their fleet. I have something to ask him. Okay. Zhang Cheng nodded and then opened his mouth. Boss, just 3 hours ago, General I from Yanwang Star contacted me, wanting to sell a batch of first and second class warships. Should we accept it? Oh, Hua Yu became interested. Are they unable to bear it anymore? How many are there? There are 217 first-class warships and 55 second-class warships. They are all old-fashioned warships. The corners of Hua Yu's mouth twitched, and he rolled his eyes. I'm not a waste recycling station here, why do you want to come here? Let him drag it to the trading star to sell it. If you have nothing else to do, go down there. Good boss. Wait. Zhang Cheng turned to look at Hua Yu, who took a sip of wine. Has our 5th-tier battleship production line been built yet? Not yet. For some key technologies, those level 3 civilizations are either unwilling to sell, or the asking price is too high. Yu thought for a while. Go to contact that fat man Garrido from Carrie Star, and tell him that I have a deal on planetary transactions, and ask him if he is interested. You mean, well, anyway, there are so many planets, but the parameters of those battleships are unique. Our own research and development speed is too slow. You know our reputation in the universe over the years. It's time to be silent for a while. Yu flicked the soot. Keep the 4 planets that belong to the same galaxy, and leave the rest to him. By the way, go to the auction house to see if there are any rare slaves. Buy some and send them back to him. I know the boss. Let's go. After Zhang Cheng left, he turned his head and looked at Tatar beside him. Are you still used to living in your new home? He. Tatar grinned and let out a characteristic silly smile. Yeah. Yu smiled. Some of your old friends will come over these few days. You are ready to meet them, don't make any trouble. I know. Tatar nodded and agreed. Seeing Yu waving his hand to chase away people, he left the house very interestingly, boarded the spaceship and went to the berthing port of the planet, preparing to arrange the connecting port. Safia, do you have any good products recently? Yu, who was completely sleepy, turned her head to look at the maid standing beside her, who nodded. Some masters, our treasure hunters paid a high price for a slave tribe that is about to become extinct at the auction house on Katu. I guarantee you will like it very much. Oh, show me the information. Yu put down the wine glass while speaking, and took the virtual screen handed by Sophia. On it was a holographic projection of a woman with long dark blue hair. Her ears were covered by the long hair, and she had blue eyebrows. In a pair of golden eyes, the pupils were only a circle or two bigger than sesame seeds. On her white arms and calves, there were some light spots like fish scales. How long will it take to arrive in Hong Kong? Shafia looked at the time. There are still about 13 hours. This mermaid tribe has 2 forms. What you see is the land form, and the other is the deep sea form. The racial talent has no effect on us, otherwise we won't be caught and will soon become extinct. Well, I've arrived in Hong Kong and picked a few good-looking ones to send, and set aside a sea area for the rest to let them breed by themselves. Yu picked up the wine glass and took a sip, then got up and came to Sophia, pinched the little purple horn on her forehead. Go to your room, and call those 2 girls by the way. Yes, Safia promised, sighed secretly and walked to her daughter's room. At the port of Order Star this morning, 4 special battleships were slowly mooring in the port. As the hatches of the battleships opened, groups of heavily armed soldiers slowly stepped off the battleships and boarded the long-awaited maglev bus. Malov, who led the team, smiled and hugged Tatar. Haha, Tatar, long time no see, how are you doing? He. Tatar hammered his chest lightly. We Skrulls have our own new home, it feels really great. Have the clansmen found it? We've found a few, and we're still expanding our search. The 2 got on the bus while chatting. The Shongren soldiers behind them took off their hoods after entering the bus and chatted in 2s and 3s. Mr. Yu. Maloof saluted Yu respectfully, and the latter waved his hand. Your mission this time is not light. The other party has 3 ecological planets in total. The 4th level warships have broken through 100, and the 3rd level and 2nd level warships have broken through 1,000. Do you need me to call people? What about their high-end combat power? The royal family sits on the main planet. The Mar only knows that members of the royal family can smash 1,000 Jin boulder with a single punch. As for whether they have other abilities, he doesn't know. After Yu finished speaking, he pointed to the projection on the coffee table. It was an orange gemstone. The introverted light seemed to describe the extraordinariness of the gemstone. This is the core seed my brother needs. Although it looks like a topaz, it is actually soft in the hand. The liquid inside can be absorbed by the locals, thereby increasing physical strength. Maloof transferred the data of the Earth core seeds to his watch database, and by the way, also transferred the data of the Mar main star. The diameter of the planet is 1.441 kilometers, and its gravity is a little lighter than that of the Earth. The Mar people are born with a pair of big feet, and their 6 toes give them a strong grip, and their technological civilization is also very advanced. The ability to independently design and build a 4th-tier warship is the best proof. The 9-day voyage is not too far away. Our spacecraft will set off after replenishing supplies. Hua Yu nodded. All right then, the Second Conqueror Legion will set off with you at that time, and they will be responsible for taking over the planet's resources from the end. Okay. Malov nodded and took Konasova and the others out of the house, and took the bus back to the port. At this time, the port was full of whistles and howls. The Legion members in the port rest area surrounded groups of incensed soldiers, and their strange noses kept smelling their fragrance. Hey, girl, the long interstellar journey must be boring, right? Do you want to go for a walk with me? Don't listen to him, little girl, go to the hotel with me to rest, ha ha ha. Is anyone willing to marry me? I have saved more than 4 universe coins over the years. Ludo, you fool, how can you save so much money without paying me back? Pay me back. Why do I have to pay back what I borrowed on my own merit? The Shangren warriors ignored the foul words of those aliens. After all, they had heard too much when dealing with pirates before, and they had already developed immunity. Immunity does not mean that they have no temper until. Hey, little girl, you smell so good. Aisha looked at the pitch-black claw on her shoulder, put down the snacks in her hand, and twisted and tugged that claw with her backhand. Amid the jaw-piercing sound of bone shattering, Aisha had a broken arm in her hand. The alien howled and covered the wound. Ah, my hand. You dare to hurt Yori, you are finished. An alien who looked like a stone man hugged his injured companion. Their second army had fought for Boss Waiu all these years, and their record was not inferior to that of the first army. Naturally, they had their eyes higher than the top. They didn't care about Tatar's instructions at all. Aisha's eyes were red, and as the laser sight circled around the group of soldiers, there were more than a dozen broken corpses on the ground. The other soldiers were taken aback, and they all took out the energy pistols around their waists. Don't move. Don't move. More than a dozen incense warriors transformed into vibrating gold forms one after another, and started wanton massacres. With their team as an example, other surrounded incense warriors also joined in. When Maloof and his party returned to the port, they saw corpses all over the ground. Aisha shook off the water stains on her hands, and when she came out of the rest area, she just saw Malov and his party coming back, and grinned. We saved a lot of money for Mr. Waiu. I see. Maloof shrugged and contacted Waiu. The soldiers of the Second Legion didn't know Shangren, and many of them were killed. Let's go first. You should transfer the First Legion here. They might be a few days late. Okay. After hanging up the phone, Waiu called a Scorching Sun warrior under his command. Ma Liang, give me a good training from your Second Legion. Some soldiers died at the port. Deal with those who have the same clan relationship with those soldiers, and call a new group of people to fill the vacancies. I know the boss. As the battleship that had replenished its supplies flew away from the port, the Second Legion that followed them began to deal with the corpses on the ground, as well as those unlucky ones from the same group as the corpses. Who? Ha! Ah! Get to work, you vile fools! A Martian wearing a tight combat uniform, waving a long whip wantonly, is surrounded by densely packed slaves of the same race. For the highly hierarchical Martian civilization, the highest is the omnipotent royal family, followed by those noble grandpas, and lastly, ordinary people like himself. As for the untouchables who are digging hard now, none of that counts as a Mar. Whoever dares to hide the seeds privately, once you find out that the whole clan is sitting together, you should think about it before hiding, and don't implicate your parents, wives and children. The overseer warned and looked around. The earth core seeds are very delicate, and the older the seeds, the thinner the skin, and the slightly harder hard objects can break the seed skin, so these low-level slaves can only dig them with bare hands. The area he was in charge of had just discovered the seeds, so a lot of manpower was needed. In those ley lines that had been excavated for hundreds of years, often a supervisor only needed to take care of 8 to 10 slaves. How could he look at hundreds of slaves under the sun like himself? This sun. He wiped off his sweat and habitually looked up at the sun, but he happened to see the big fireworks and the densely packed crashed fighter planes. 4 fourth-tier warships that had been refitted twice completed the final space jump, and 2 warships made a short jump to the left and right again. The hatch doors of the remaining 2 warships opened, and densely packed Shangren warriors flew straight from the battleship exit to the khaki planet below. The 2 warships that were launched directly returned to the previous jumping point to park. Malov, who was wearing a nano armor, swung the nano cloak behind him, paralyzing those warships lingering on the periphery of the planet. These are all money and cannot be wasted. One team received. The second team received. Team 3 received. 600 fighters, led by Malov, Konasova and Musia separately, flew towards the warships that were still entangled. The short space fluctuation just now sent teams of fighters to fly over for investigation. When these pilots were numb seeing the soldiers approaching one by one, they had just had time to report to the battleship when the flying Shongran soldiers pierced through the fuselage and turned into blossoming space fireworks. Pull the alarm, quickly pull the alarm. The commander of a Tier 8 warship, seeing the images fed back by the frontline fighters, immediately ordered the pilot, turn the muzzle and blast those unknown armed forces to pieces. Yes, buzz, buzz. The gun barrel on the battleship turned its direction and began to condense energy. Shazili, Aisha and others who fell behind quickly approached the battleship. More than a dozen huge balls of blue energy sprayed out from the muzzle. Under the envious gazes of Maloof and Boyika, Shazili and the others withstood a huge energy bullet respectively, and those energy bullets became smaller and smaller as the phantoms shook until they disappeared. Gods of the present world, what kind of monsters are these? The commander stared blankly at Shazili and the others on the monitor, and before he could regain his senses and give an order, the siren sounded that the hull was destroyed in the command room. What happened? He hurriedly called up the composition map of the battleship, looked at the 5 or 6 areas on the ship that were flashing red, and after turning on the area monitoring, he found nothing but a place of corpses. Bang! The closed iron door was directly smashed through by a metal arm. Amid the scalp-numbing sound of metal deformation, a steel figure walked into the command room of the battleship. Aisha came to the trembling commander of the battleship. She tapped his forehead with her right index finger. Under the orange flames, the commander turned into fly ash before he could scream. Crack! After breaking the necks of several pilots, she directly pulled off the emergency brake of the battleship, pulled out the energy key, and returned to the next battleship on the same road. Your Majesty, those demons broke through the planet's air defense system and are rushing towards various positions. An old Martian hurried into the palace and knelt down in front of a tall Martian, who kicked the old man out of the room. I'm not blind. Shar Khan pressed the contact button on the seat. The royal army is fighting. Either destroy this group of intruders, or our royal family of Mar will disappear in this universe. Yes. Groups of royal Martian warriors wearing special metal combat uniforms kicked their feet hard on the ground and leapt thousands of meters. After landing, they leapt again and rushed towards the intruders who wreaked havoc. Attention all teams, try your best to surround and kill the Martian royal warriors who are nearby. Malov said that his body was completely turned into gold, and his body floating in the low sky rushed towards the pounced Martians. The sound barrier created during the flight made those Martian warriors focus their attention on him. Bang! Click! Crack! The Martian warrior who punched Malov had his head crushed by Zhenjin's fist, and his headless body fell limply to the ground. Ignoring the shouts of the Marlovians, Malov sent them to meet the living god with one punch. Sitting in the palace, the king of the Mar people, this is the first time he has experienced what despair is like. Those intruders with metal bodies ignored the energy bombs of the main guns of the 4th-tier battleships. Even if 1 or 2 were accidentally blasted into the building or underground by the energy bombs, they would quickly float into the air and continue their destruction. Their eyes can fire energy rays comparable to main guns. They can knock down a building with one punch. They can crack the earth with one kick. He watched helplessly as his uncle Wang had his neck broken by a hateful intruder, and his elder brother and younger brother were also pierced by the terrifying energy sight. He was so cold, so hopeless and helpless. Standing up and kneeling in front of the altar in the hall, he looked at the living God whom he had believed in all his life, with his hands clasped together, his face full of sorrow, and tears slowly falling down his face. He choked up and prayed, God of the living, help your believers. Bang! What answered him was a figure that descended from the sky. Shazili, who was plump and tall, slowly stood up straight, and looked at the king of the Mar people with a metal face. Mar people, take out your treasured earth core seeds. Earth core seeds. His eyes widened suddenly. Are you here to ask for earth core seeds? Shazili rolled out the metal, showing her fair and tender face, and glanced at the other party with disdain. Aside from the seeds of the earth's core, what else can your civilization offer? Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. King Mar suddenly laughed, and stared at Shazili with bloodshot eyes for a long time. Don't even think about it. You killed so many of my people, and you still want Earth Core seeds. Tui. Dodging the other party's spittle, she stepped forward and kicked the king flying, and kicked her right foot on the ground. Shazili rushed up at a faster speed, grabbed the king's collar and flung it backwards. Coincidentally, she just smashed into the idol on the altar. Puff, cough cough. The king vomited blood, struggling to get up on his elbows, when a dull and hoarse voice suddenly came from his mind. Poor little bug, do you want revenge? Who? He. The hoarse voice continued. Think about your dead clansmen, think about the civilization created by your ancestors. As long as you open your heart and let me control your body, I will solve them for you. At the same time as the sound sounded, a pool of black and red viscous liquid dripped from the chest of the broken god statue, and slowly penetrated into his body until it disappeared. Da. As Shazili's footsteps got closer, the deep and hoarse voice sounded again. Do you want to live to take revenge, or just wait for the enemy to come and kill you? I am willing to accept you. Avenge me and my people. He. Of course. Say no. Shazili, who had just arrived in front of the ruins of the idol, was sent flying by a big dark red fist before she could finish her sentence. She hurriedly manipulated the magnetic field to make an emergency stop in midair, and teleported to the front of the ruins. Come out. Bang, crash, hush, hoot. A dark red humanoid monster with a height of meters broke through the ruins of the god statue and roared to the sky. A pair of pale and even ashen crescent-shaped big eyes were full of uncontrollable joy and tyranny. Ha. The monster laughed wantonly. It's finally out, after being imprisoned for so long, it's finally out. Ha. Ban Sai Khan, you fool, dare to lie to me, you wait for me. Enough laughing. Shazili looked at the monster in front of her with disgust, but couldn't help being curious. Did you eat that little dwarf? Little dwarf. Shazili pointed to the ruins of the idol behind it. It's the dwarf I threw into it just now. Crash. The right half of the monster's face seemed to be receding, revealing the grinning king inside. I'm fine, I feel great now. After speaking, he took a step forward and grabbed Shazili by the neck, pulling her in front of him. I will eat your heads one by one. He. Speaking of that, the big mouth full of fangs opened wider and wider, and finally bit Shazili's head. Instead of biting half of the head as he and the monster thought, there was a sharp pain from the mouth. Catch. Sigh. Shazili, who was made of Edmund alloy all over her body, had a smile on her silver-white alloy face, and looked at the monster's incomplete fangs. It seems that you have been imprisoned for too long, and your body is seriously deficient in calcium. Sigh. The monster wanted to throw Shazili away, but found that Shazili grabbed her neck with her backhand. Her eyes began to turn red, and two fiery laser sights hit its head. Aren't you very arrogant? Sigh. The monster couldn't stand the temperature of the laser sight, and hastily retracted into King Mar's body, then oozes out from under his feet, swims to Shazili's feet, and possesses her nano armor. Puff. Shazili casually threw the headless corpse with smoking neck aside, searched in the empty hall, and found Shazili, who found nothing for a long time, and hid in the hall as if venting. With the cracked floor under her feet, her body rushed out of this luxurious palace and floated in midair. Looking at the companions who were constantly destroying buildings around her, she licked her lips with her bright red tongue, and rushed out in one direction. The bunker that was originally attached to the nano armor quickly got into her body without her noticing. Great goddess of beauty, a doll is willing to believe in you. A dirty Martian slave with big feet knelt at Shazili's feet and shivered. Behind him were densely packed Martian slaves and civilians, each of whom touched the ground with their heads and trembled. Beautiful goddess. Poochie. Aisha next to Shazili couldn't help covering her mouth and laughing. Shazili gave her sister a white look, and looked down at the dirty Mar under her feet. Do you want to live? Think. Very good. Shazili grinned. Your royal family has destroyed all the stored Earth Core seeds, so if you want to survive, you can dig seeds for me, dig out the best quality seeds, and exempt your family from being slaves. If you want to get your family out of slavery, it depends on whether you can dig out seeds that satisfy us. Adil opened his mouth. The tunnel that can dig out the best seeds has collapsed during the battle between you and the royal family 2 days ago. That's something you should consider. Shazili didn't know why, and she got angry easily these 2 days. I'll give you a week to dig out the best kind of seeds. Every day, 1,000 people from your tribe will be beheaded until you dig out. After speaking, she turned and left, while Aisha looked at Shazili's back, frowned and came to Malufu who was drinking wine. Instructor Malufu, there is something wrong with Shazili. Malav hiccuped, babbling and babbling as he missed the feeling of being drunk before. You don't care about her, anyway, it doesn't matter how many slaves die. If we kill them all, we can go to other planets to catch a batch. Oh, that's right. He threw away the empty wine bottle and touched his bearded mouth. The boss asked you to go back first. Connors has made a new breakthrough in the genetic chain of your race. He probably asked you to go back for a blood test to see if you can add new abilities to you. I see. Aisha nodded, turned around and was about to leave when a thin Martian boy stepped forward on his knees and looked at the two nervously. Gods, I know a tunnel that can dig out the best Earth core seeds. Can I ask the gods to forgive my mother and sister from being slaves? Oh, Aisha turned her head and looked at him with a smile. You take people to dig now. As long as you dig out 3, your mother, your sister and you can get rid of slave status. If you dig more than 10, you will be the supervisor of the tunnel from now on. Thank you God, thank you God. Seeing the young man taking 20 or so slaves away and being taken away by other soldiers, Aisha patted Malav on the shoulder. Let's wait here for a while, it's better to bring a batch of seeds back than empty-handed. Hi, whatever you want. Maluf waved his hand and let those slaves start to act. This magical gem is also useful to them. Since it can be absorbed by these natives, after the research of Connors and the others, they will naturally be able to produce corresponding potions for the use of fighters like themselves. Who would think that they are powerful? Half a month later, all the Shangren warriors returned to the new elf planet in battleships, and the 5 Malavs began to guard Mars Star. Wayu's Scorching Sun warriors would not take over until March was completely stabilized. Master, we brought back a batch of Earth core seeds of the highest quality. Shazili and Aisha, leading more than a dozen incense warriors, knelt down in front of Joaquin. They held a frosted box high with both hands. Joaquin waved his hand casually, and these boxes were opened in the air, revealing the Earth core seeds carefully embedded in the cushioned cotton. 100 per floor, 5 floors per box. Before Joaquin could speak, Emma, who was sitting on the sofa with Wayuan in her arms, smiled strangely. I didn't expect Shazili to bring back an interesting little thing besides the Earth core seeds. Sazali, take off the nano device. Following Emma's order, Sazali took off her neckband, wristwatch, and finally her high heels without hesitation. Following the removal of the nano device, Sazali stood naked in front of everyone. Emma frowned. Edelman alloying. Shazili's milky white skin instantly turned silvery white. A pool of dark red viscous liquid oozed from her feet, and was caught in the hand of the alloyed Aisha. She looked at the viscous liquid on her hand curiously. What is this? Symbiont. Joaquin got up with a smile, and came to Aisha. This is a good thing. It can still provide you with stable combat power when your mutant ability is limited. There are only 2 weaknesses, one is sound waves and the other is high-temperature flames. Speaking of his right hand touching the mass of liquid, after the slight coolness, the pool of liquid was completely absorbed into Joaquin's body, and a deep and hoarse voice sounded in his mind. Aren't you afraid of being controlled by me? You can't control me, just like the girl you possessed before. Do you want to try? After a long silence, the voice rang again. I'm hungry. What's your name? Long roar. Joaquin looked at the maid beside him. Go to the underground cultivation room, pick 10 newly matured clones, don't need to be activated, shaved their hair, washed them, and sent them here. Yes. Joaquin waved to Shazili, who was fully dressed again. Send the seeds to Connors, let him purify the concentration of the medicine according to the original formula. We have a lot of seeds. I know my master. The 2 nodded and led the soldiers out of the room. Joaquin looked at the sleeping Hua Yuan and Hua Yao. Where did Dasha leave Hua Yao to you? Emma rolled her eyes. You don't know what virtue she has. Okay. Joaquin shrugged and sat down on the sofa. Come out. Sigh. From Joaquin's left shoulder, an ugly and vicious dark red head protruded, startling everyone in the room. I'm hungry. Understood. Someone has already prepared it for you. Joaquin took out a cigarette and signaled to Emma, who stared at her. Go out and smoke. You take the children back to the room, and Chong Xiao will eat later. I'm afraid you won't be able to bear it. Emma raised her hand and patted him, and carried the two children back to the room. Joaquin then turned his head to look at the ugly Chong Xiao. Tell me, how did you get attached to Shazili? Chong Xiao's mouth full of fangs smacked. I was driven out by the ethnic group, because my birth was a mistake. I am different from other ethnic groups, because I am not afraid of sound waves. To the ethnic group, I am a different kind. So I stayed away from the group, and found a cave to sleep alone, until an escaped spaceship landed next to the cave where I slept. After being awakened, I climbed into the spaceship and was possessed by a Mar. With my help, he rebuilt his own civilization, and he reneged on the terms he had agreed upon. He forced me out of my body with flames, and then I was imprisoned until the little girl broke the device that imprisoned me not long ago. Quote. That's it. Joaquin picked up the virtual screen on the coffee table and swiped to Malouf's communicator. Go grab some experts on the history of the Mars and see if there are any secret histories left by their ancestors. You want to find my people. Joaquin glanced at Chong Xiao. Do you know how to get back? Chong Xiao shook his head. I don't know. Then you ask such a mentally retarded question. Soon the maids brought the clones to the hall, and Joaquin called to Connors. Don't think about anything, just shout a long cry. Quote question mark question mark question mark quote. Connors looked at Joaquin in bewilderment, and the latter shrank his head. Long Xiao. Sigh. A symbiont with dark red and gray and white stripes all over its body wrapped itself around Connors and let out a loud roar, and took a mouthful with its big mouth that smacked down a clone of a saber-toothed tiger. The maids frowned at the chomping Chong Xiao, and watched each other's bites bite one after another. Soon they were about to leave with the headless clone, but they were stopped by Chong Xiao. I haven't eaten for a long time, don't waste these. After finishing speaking, he ate those clones completely, then stretched out his slender tongue and licked his lower lip, and retracted into Connors contentedly. Connors blinked his eyes and looked at his hands, and then looked at the blood on the carpet. Ah! Joaquin patted him on the back very intimately, and retracted the long whistle. It won't be long before we will find a steady stream of symbionts. In addition to continuing to conquer the gene chain, your department has a new task. I can't take it, vomit. Connors almost vomited bile. A researcher of him actually ate so much today, don't mention how disgusting he is. These symbionts need to eat a lot of dopamine. If you don't want to come back a few times in the future, find a way to extract dopamine and make it into some energy bars or chewable tablets. That's still disgusting. Vomit. Joaquin rolled his eyes. Don't be hypocritical, take away the straw blanket you vomited on. What did you eat? It smells so good. Only Connors, who was injured himself, left with a straw blanket. Is it here? In the Tier 9 battleship in the void, Joaquin tilted his head and looked down at the two Mars at his feet. An elderly Mar with a gray beard kept kowtowing. According to the records of the ancestors, it is indeed here. Joaquin nodded. If I find what I want, you and your family will naturally be able to live, otherwise, I will wipe out half of you Marians based on the current number. After he finished speaking, he waved his hands, and the two Shangren warriors carried the Mars out of the command room. Joaquin put his hands behind his back. Send a landing craft to go down to investigate first, and if you find the target, immediately capture it. Yes. Konosova nodded and left the command room, and Joaquin poked out Chong Xiao's head from his back. There's no need to investigate, it's here, the color of the old star that is feces yellow, and those black spots all over it. You sure? Of course. Joaquin picked up the communicator. There is no need to check. The battleship sank and landed directly, and the soldiers were metallized and ready to search for the target. Boom. The flames and airflow spouted from the bottom of the battleship caused the dust to scatter, and as the hatch opened, soldiers flew out of the cabin one by one. On their backs, there was a large exaggerated transparent storage tank, which was a specially made fiberglass container based on the liquid power of the roar. I've always wondered, how do you survive without food on your planet? Chong Xiao's long and narrow eyes flashed. Our symbiont has no food, which will only lead to slow movement, and then fall into a deep sleep. During the deep sleep, we will absorb some free energy in the universe. When the absorbed energy is enough, we will wake up and look for food. If there is no food, we will fall asleep again. I don't know how long it has been like this. Found the owner. As the separate screens in the command room lit up, a soldier held up the blue liquid in his hand and shook it in front of the camera he carried, then threw it into the container on his back, closed the lid and continued to search for the next one. They stayed in the hometown of this symbiote for nearly 2 months, and captured countless symbiotes. Originally, Joaquin wanted to capture as many as possible and let his subordinates study carefully to see if they could use the symbiote as a model to create a controlled army. Unexpectedly, the next morning, a jar full of symbiotes turned into a symbiote that was a circle or two larger than the others. After calling up the monitor to check the replay, Joaquin, with the mentality of experimenting, asked his soldiers to search for the symbiotes and bring them back to devour each other. Raising GU, the Chinese ancestors played with the leftovers. Eat any more and they'll start splitting the next generation. When Joaquin inspected these symbiotes this afternoon, Chong Xiao expressed his concern. These symbiotes have devoured too many of their own kind, and if they are allowed to devour them like this, their strength will be extremely powerful. I'm afraid these jars of yours won't be able to trap them, especially the next generation they split, which is very likely to be stronger than the previous generation. Really, this is really good news. Joaquin glanced at him with a smile, and then called Aisha. The fully stored warships will return first, and hand over the data recorded these days to Connor's Research Institute. You come out too. As he spoke, he forced Chong Xiao out of his body, stuffed it into a small jar, and handed it to Aisha. From now on, Chong Xiao will be Connor's exclusive symbiont, and let them jointly be responsible for researching and cultivating the next generation. Tell Connors, don't be afraid of serious losses, we can catch him again if he loses it, and let him reproduce the symbiont well. It is best to eliminate the two weaknesses of the symbiont through reproduction. Yes, Joaquin nodded and got out of the Elf No. 20 battleship. After returning to his flagship, he picked up the communicator. Attention all arresters, regardless of the size and color of the symbiote, one catches one at a time. After each jar is full, wait for the symbiote to be swallowed. Continue to fill it up twice, and send the symbiote to the warehouse for storage. Following his order, the captured fighters became more and more busy. After all, at the beginning, they would pick some big ones, or those with pure colors, because the purer the color, the stronger the strength of the symbiote. Now there is no need to choose, just catch them and stuff them into the jar. The time was January 2004, 1. The first batch of 3-generation symbionts were born. More than 22% of the symbionts were still sensitive to sound waves, and symbionts were still afraid of high-temperature flames. Connors entered his research records into the computer. An ugly dark red head poked out from his back, and his saliva dripped on Connor's white coat. Four-eyed boy, I'm hungry. Go get dopamine by yourself, don't bother me. Seeing Connors, who was still busy, Chong Xiao was furious. A tentacle rolled up a tray not far away, and slapped Connors hard on the back of the head. Hey. Maybe it's because the nerve reflex arc is relatively long, or maybe Connors didn't want to be too embarrassed by shouting, so he uttered dryly, wow. Can you be more perfunctory? Chong Xiao threw away the tray with a bulging semicircle in the middle, detached from Connor's body, slowly squirmed on the straw blanket, and casually got on the body of a fragrant girl. Xiaomi na, let's eat delicious cumin dry pot now. Chiliu. Mina is injecting medicine into the cells of the test piece, no time. Chong Xiao squinted his long and narrow eyes, and suddenly put his head next to Mina's ear. Woof, woof woof, woof woof. Ah, Chong Xiao. Because of Chong Xiao's sudden dog barking, Mina frightened Mina with too much force, and the nano-injection tube directly penetrated the cells. Chong Xiao saw that something was wrong, and hurried out to escape, but was kicked directly against the wall of the door by a small alloy foot. People hated dogs and howling, and crawled out of the laboratory cursing in their hearts, curled up in the long aisle, looked at the densely packed storage tanks in the aisle from time to time, and countless symbionts of different sizes and colors fell asleep in each tank. When it passed by one of the storage tanks, it looked at the dark mass of symbiotes inside, and couldn't help showing contempt. It really didn't know how this symbiote had the face to survive. The weak ones didn't even want to eat other symbiotes. Crack. The symbiote slammed on the jar, frightening Chong Xiao. The two symbiotes looked at each other through the glass jar. Long Ju Chengxiao pulled out the jar containing the symbiote, rolled it around on the ground, and finally rolled all the way to Connor's lounge. Tired of playing, Chong Xiao pushed the jar again, then climbed into the jar containing dopamine and began to absorb it, but the rolling jar happened to hit an obtuse angle on the switch. As the lid was opened, the dark symbiont carefully climbed out of the jar, looked around and got into a ventilation duct. Let's go, let's go, to the earth, he he he. The 2-year-old Hua Yuan, with short legs, walked around Dasha's side non-stop, and stretched his head from time to time to look at his younger brother, but was hugged by Hua Jin. My younger brother is sleeping. Oh, a group of hundreds of people boarded the number 1 flagship one by one. A group of dark symbiosis quietly got into a box and was carried into the battleship by the fragrant maid. Today is September 2006, 9. The first batch of 5th-generation symbionts reproduced successfully. Compared with the previous 4th-generation symbionts, the will of the 5th-generation symbionts is more pure. The power fed back to the host is also unmatched by previous generations. Its weakness. After taking notes, Connors picked up the cup and took a sip of coffee. Nina, go and take out the 1st-generation symbionts from number 3111 to number 3120, and then throw the 5th-generation symbiont number 47 into it, and see if the 5th-generation symbionts will awaken new abilities after absorbing the 1st-generation symbionts. Good teacher. Bruce, Betty, who was lying on the hospital bed, was still having nightmares. This made Rose, who had been squatting in front of the hospital bed all night, look heartbroken and jealous, heartbroken for his daughter's infatuation, and jealous of that stupid Bruce Banner. How could he let his daughter never forget? Blancus. General. A strong soldier walked into the ward, and Ross held Betty's little hand in both hands. Have you found Banner yet? Not yet. Humph. Rose gently put down Betty's little hand, tucked the quilt for her, and then got up and took Blancus out of the ward. Go and stabilize the researchers who have been attacking Banner, and we must not relax the search for Banner. Yes. Seeing Blancus leave in a hurry, Ross looked back at Betty, who was still sleeping, squeezed his fists and left the hospital, got in the car and lit a cigarette. Go back to the Air Force Base laboratory. The car slowly drove away from the hospital. On the bench resting at the entrance of the hospital, a red-haired woman put down the examination report in her hand, and pressed the communication button of the headset with her right hand. The target left the hospital. Roger that. Coulson, who was already a senior agent, drove Patton to keep up with the military jeep in front. It seems that General Ross is going to be unlucky this time. But Patton shook his head. No, you must know that he provided a large number of 2nd-generation super soldier potions for the military. Those people above are also beneficiaries. They will not embarrass Ross because of this accident. Don't forget the destructive power of that monster. Isn't this the super soldier that the military is thinking about? That's not a warrior. At best, it's just a monster that only knows how to destroy. Coulson turned the steering wheel to the right while talking. Drink 2 after get off work. It is good. Their car passed by an extremely flamboyant sports car. The driver was Tony Stark, a well-known playboy in New York. He was eating a cheeseburger while manipulating the steering wheel. Baja, happy, forget about the little peppers for now. I sent you a list. You collected everything and sent it to my villa. I have an inspiration. Living in such a fast-paced metropolis is the luck of some people, and the tragedy of some people. For example, in a dirty alley, a homeless man collapsed on the ground and twitched. After a long time, a ball of black slime emerged from his body, wandered along the wall, and finally got into a half-open window. Grab him, don't let him get away. Vanessa, shoot him, kill him. Shut your stinking mouth, Wade. 2 men and women in black and red tight combat uniforms were chasing the young man in the black leather jacket in front of him. The young man turned his head to look at the pursuer from time to time. Chiete, why do you keep chasing me? I didn't provoke you. While running, Wade was playing with knives. Hey, buddy, you can't say that. We didn't chase you, we were just chasing Dowlier. Don't you know that you are famous? The ARC group has offered a reward of 3,000 million. As long as you hand it over to the other party, 3,000 million will be credited immediately, and I can take my beloved Vanessa to travel around the world. Oh. Ho. Wade spread his hands and looked at the young man, who suddenly turned into 3 figures and entered the alley, and spread his hands. Okay, it seems that the 3,000 million is not so easy to get. After speaking, he took out his gun. Bang bang bang. The young man in the black leather jacket in the 2 alleys fell to the ground. In the alley on the right, the young man staggered and ran for a while before lying on the ground with a plop. Wade blew on the muzzle of his gun angrily. My marksmanship has improved again. We will withdraw when we catch someone, but we are not the only ones who have his place. As Vanessa said, she patted his butt, and then came to the young man in a catwalk, took out the handcuffs around his waist, and just squatted down, but found that the young man was trembling all over, and the veins on his neck were bulging. Vanessa, who had experienced it once, hurriedly stepped back. Hanny, he has awakened again. Ward, Fack. Wade hurried forward to take the handcuffs from Vanessa's hand, and was about to handcuff the young man under him, but was kicked away by the latter. The young man quickly got up, and one figure after another came out of his body. These identical youths looked around for some bricks, sticks or trash can lids, and rushed towards Wade and Vanessa. The main body of the youth looked at his hands excitedly. I broke through. Bang bang bang. Fack. Wade shot and slashed at the young man who was rushing over with his knife. Vanessa rushed out of the crowd, raised her hand and shot, and directly beat the big head of the excited young man into a rotten watermelon. With the death of the main body of the youth, those illusioned youths disappeared one by one, and the bricks and other sundries used as weapons fell all over the floor. Oh, fuck. Wade glanced at the corpse and cursed angrily. Vanessa cancelled the imitation of Wade and returned to her original appearance, staring at Wade with her big eyes. If you used teleportation, we would have caught the living one long ago. Hey, you said it yourself, you want to experience the game of police catching criminals. However, under the gaze of Vanessa's death, Wade shut his mouth wisely, pulled off his hood, and revealed his recovered handsome face. Okay, it's all my fault, let's take the body away and see how much money we can get. After speaking, he stepped forward to pick up the corpse, held Vanessa's little hand, and used teleportation. After several consecutive teleportations, he came to the underground parking garage of the fixed building, opened a small box on a load-bearing column, and pressed the button. I brought the mutants you need. Soon a white coat came out of a hidden elevator with several security guards in combat uniforms. The white coat looked at the corpse whose head had become a rotten watermelon. He reached out and touched the neck of the corpse. Feeling the residual warmth of the corpse, he nodded. 3,000 million will be credited to your account within half an hour. After speaking, he turned and left. One of the security guards carried the body and followed into the elevator. Wade whistled. Shish, ha ha ha, honey, we have money for our honeymoon. Vanessa frowned and looked at the closed elevator. Why did they want the corpse? Just for the extracted gamma level 10 gene. Oh, shit. Wade patted his forehead and opened the small box again. Hey, buddy, that's an alpha level mutant who just broke through. 3,000 million is not enough. We will identify the genetic level here, and the money will not be missing from you. Okay. Wade shrugged and took Vanessa back to his cozy nest. Jimmy Maduro, a gamma level mutant, robbed 6 banks at the same time 2 weeks ago, but failed to catch the subject in the end. Looking at the pre-mortem data of the corpse on the computer, the white coat accepted the inspection report handed over by his subordinates, and raised his eyebrows. It is indeed at the alpha level. It is obvious that the gene concentration has just broken through and is too late to stabilize. It seems that Connors is busy. Extract the most active cells for cold storage. This ability is too special. Let the Scorching Sun warriors escort them to the new elf star. After the white coat ordered, he took out his custom-made mobile phone and dialed a number. Wilson, I just received a very interesting copy of Genes and Cells, and I went overseas to remit $5 million to Wade's account. In the office, Wilson, who was enjoying the leg massage of the alien slave girl, dialed another number for his financial staff. Ding. Wade, who had just finished rolling the sheets, picked up his phone and looked at the amount on it, blinked and slapped his face. Thick, Lee Crab. What happened? Vanessa leaned her head over to take a look, and covered her mouth excitedly. Thick, Lee Crab. Ha ha ha, we got rich this time. Wade rolled around on the bed with his arms around Vanessa excitedly. The two of them thought about where to go next, what kind of luxury car to buy, and private jets. Wade entered the bathroom with a smile, sat on the toilet and smoked a cigarette, fantasized about the beauty of Shangche, and smiled more stupidly than the second idiot. A sticky black liquid on top of his head slowly slid down and melted into his back. Uncle Shit, my brother and I are here to play with you. Xiao Yuan led Xiao Wyo, and the two ran into Tony's house on short legs, followed by 4 fragrant girls who looked about 14 to 5 years old. They were indeed extremely rare twins. They followed behind the two with big bags and small bags. The first time they entered the house, they began to check whether there were any hidden dangers that might endanger the safety of the two young masters. Jarvis, Master Yuan here. Where's Uncle Shit? Sir, you haven't come back yet. You can rest in the house for a while. Do you want me to prepare juice for you? Yuan waved his hand. I want a Coke. Yao on the side grinned bouncingly. I want to drink lemonade. Okay, two young masters. Soon 2 cups of soda were placed on the coffee table by an intelligent robotic arm, and Yuan took a sip happily. Ha, I miss you so much. Yao was sitting on the sofa, shaking his short legs happily. The soda that tastes so delicious, the eldest mother and the mother don't want me to drink it, how disgusting. Jarvis, Master Yuan here. I'll eat grilled chicken, cheeseburger, fries and seafood pizza. I want to. Okay, buy more, and Lisa and the others want it too. Okay. The 4 girls habitually stood behind them silently. The 2 girls ignored Tony, who was announcing the closure of the weapon research department on the TV, and started to change channels with the remote control. Yuan wanted to watch Tom and Jerry, and Yao wanted to watch SpongeBob SquarePants. The 2 were fighting for the ownership of the remote control. I'm brother, let me see first. I'm the younger brother, you have to let me go, that's what the 2 mothers said. This is not the new elf star, I am my brother, you have to listen to me. No, I just want to watch SpongeBob SquarePants. Yao hid the remote control in his arms, pouted his butt to prevent Yuan from snatching it. Lisa, as Yuan's personal maid, naturally didn't want to let her young master suffer, leaned over and said with a smile, Young master, shouldn't good things be shared? Aren't you sharing now, Lisa? Joshua pushed Lisa aside without hesitation. Don't forget that the young master is also your master. Lillian stepped forward and glared at Joshua. What do you mean by that? Joshua glanced at her. It's not your sister's turn to speak here. Do you want to fight? Just when the 2 groups of people were at war, Yuan was stronger than Yao by relying on his own strength and scratching the little guy's itchy flesh, and successfully snatched the remote control. Yao grinned and snot bubbled out. You snatched my remote control, I will tell the big mother that you bullied me. I'll just watch it for a while, be obedient, when the burgers come back, let's watch SpongeBob SquarePants together. However, Yao lost his temper. I want to watch it now. Yuan also lost his temper. I won't show it to you. Woo, you bullied me. Yao wanted to hit Yuan with his small fist, but Lillian subconsciously reached out to block it, but was kicked out of the living room by Lina, who had been silent all this time. Lillian was kicked out of the villa by this kick, and rolled on the ground a few times to stabilize her figure. The 2 people who didn't like each other completely broke out because of this kick. Anyway, this is not a new elf star. They stepped on the lawn with their right foot, and their figures passed through the big hole she made, and hit Gulina, who was about to attack Lisa. The 2 directly smashed the door and wrestled in midair. Yao, who was crying, was also taken aback by the 2 of them. His little mouth opened and widened, and just as one snot bubble burst, another popped up. Wow, Mom. Yuan looked at his brother, who was crying loudly, and felt very uncomfortable for a moment. He reached out to wipe Yao's tears, but Joshua stopped him first. My lord. Bang. Lisa kicked her away before she could say the word. Herringbone, my master is comforting the little master, don't be shameless. Seeing that Joshua, who took care of herself, suffered a loss, Yao cried even harder. Woo, Yasha. Hearing her little master's call, Joshua's emotions affected by the 6th generation of venom suddenly rose. She rushed into the living room and kicked Lisa away. Then, just as she was about to comfort Yao, she was knocked out of the villa by Lisa. The 2 little ones are left alone sitting on the sofa and staring at each other. Tony, do you know how many employees will be laid off due to your decision? Do you know that our company and the military still have more than a dozen contracts with a limited number of years? Do you know how much we will lose? Our company's stock price should be based on your words. It lost more than $20 billion in half an hour. It is a US dollar, not a bar coin. Tony, who was sitting in the back seat of the Rolls-Royce, looked at the scenery outside the car window, and rolled his eyes vaguely. Don't worry, uncle, I have my own considerations. In fact, I have found a new way to make money. Losing money is only temporary. Think about it for yourself, isn't it right? After hanging up the phone, Tony took the cheeseburger from Pepper and took a bite. Happy, why did you buy so many burgers and fries today? There are also several seafood pizzas. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.